Chapter 690. Zhang Yan followed Du Shixuan to the Paleo flying carriage. Just as he stood still, sect leader Qiao and Madame Zhao stood up to welcome him personally, showing their respect and giving him a lot of face. After greeting, Du Shixuan took a step forward and presented the sword in his hand. He said loudly, "This sword was given to me by fellow Zhang. I now present it to my father." Sect leader Qiao smiled. "Is it the sword that fellow Zhang used to kill Elder Jinling?" Du Shixuan moved his hand higher and said, "That's right." Sect leader Qiao saw how serious he was and knew that this magic sword was not as simple as it seemed. He first glanced at the stairs, then slowly stepped forward and reached out to take a look. He couldn't help but stare and said, "Old Jinling's primordial spirit?" Madame Zhao's eyes widened as well. She leaned over and said with surprise, "Husband, it really is this old man." Sect leader Qiao's expression was calm, but his heart was overjoyed. Elder Jinling's position as the guardian elder was given to him by the previous sect leader. Not only was he familiar with Xianyu, but he could also get some clues about the techniques that the cultivators in the sect practiced. Even if he couldn't get anything out of him, he must know the details of the various celestial cities in Xianyu. Now that it was in his hands, it was undoubtedly beneficial to Zhong Tai. He was in a good mood and couldn't help but smile. "My son has given me a big gift." Du Shixuan cupped his fists. "I don't dare to take credit for this. This is all fellow Zhang's ability." Sect leader Qiao's gaze shifted to Zhang Yan and said seriously, "That is indeed the case. Come, give him the coiling dragon chair." Immediately, 6 disciples brought over a large chair. When the chair was laid out, it took up an area of 10 feet. There were over 100 flood dragons carved on the chair, each with angry eyes and long beards. Upon closer inspection, it seemed like they were still slowly swimming around. It was as if they were alive, which was really shocking. However, Zhang Yan's vision was good, so he could see that the abnormality was caused by the chair drawing spiritual energy from the ground and not a living dragon. Madame Zhao said with a smile, "This coiled dragon chair was created by our founding master when he killed 100 green dragons and used their bones to refine it. It has always been used to entertain important guests." Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, sect leader Qiao." Sect leader Qiao gestured and said, "Fellow Taoist, please take a seat." Zhang Yan took a few steps back. After sect leader Qiao and his wife sat down, he also sat down. As soon as he sat down, he felt his entire body being enveloped by a cool spiritual aura, and his eyes and ears became clear. His entire body felt comfortable, and even his spiritual vigor flowed much faster. It was almost comparable to when he was cultivating in the Great Pagoda Pavilion. He could not help but nod to himself. This fruit was a rare treasure. Qiao Zhangmeng said, "Zhang Zhenren has killed the golden spirit old man, my Zhongtai has eliminated a great enemy, and also bestowed me with a magical sword. I don't know how to thank you." Zhang Yan replied, "Sect leader Qiao is overpraising me. Since I have signed the contract, of course I will be loyal to you." Qiao Zhangmen unconsciously nodded. He turned his head to a servant and said, "Men, bring fellow Taoist Zhang's gift list." The disciple didn't dare to hesitate. He quickly searched for it and took it out, respectfully presenting it in front of the table. Qiao Zhangmeng took a look at the gift list. He could not help but be surprised. The item that Zhang Yan asked for was different from the others. It was not a pill or a talisman. Instead, it was something that San Wei suspected to be used by the cultivators of the evil sect to cultivate. He was puzzled. Could it be that fellow Taoist Zhang is related to the cultivators of the evil sect? He had already found out from Madame Zhao that Zhang Yan and Shenbai Shuang, who occupied the divine house and started the sect, were of the same lineage. He originally came from another continent, so he did not think that Zhang Yan was a member of the evil sect. After thinking for a while, he could not get the gist of it, so he simply tossed the matter aside. He pointed at the gift list and asked Madame Zhao, "Madam, other than the ones in the treasury, do you still have more of these 3 items?" Madame Zhao turned her eyes and looked at it. She pondered for a moment and said, if I remember correctly, these spiritual medicines were obtained after we broke through the corpse cult's mountain gate. However, after we occupied the celestial city, we obtained more of them. Because they were not too important, we did not store them in the treasury. These items are of Ean's splendor and are useless for the cultivation of my sect's disciples. Of course, we still have quite a lot of them. However, we will have to go back before we can slowly examine them. Zhang Yan smiled. These 3 spirit herbs weren't some kind of treasure. If sect leader Qiao gave the order to search for them, he didn't believe that he couldn't get them. Most likely, sect leader Qiao wanted to tie him down so that he could continue to work for Zhong Tai. Sect leader Qiao said apologetically, if that's the case, I can only wait until after the Dragon Pillar meeting to search for them. If fellow Taoist has any other requests, please do not hesitate to tell me. I will definitely find a way to fulfill them. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, I do have one thing that I would like to ask sect leader Qiao to give me some face. However, it is not convenient to mention it now. Let's talk about it after the battle. If there was a chance, he would return the favor to the 6th prince. However, now was not the right time to talk about it. Sect leader Qiao had the intention to rope him in, so he was not afraid that he would reach out to him. He was only afraid that he would not have any desires. He did not want to get to the bottom of the matter. He smiled and said, that's fine too. After I defeat Xianyu, I will drink and chat with fellow Taoist Zhang. As the 3 of them spoke, the cultivators and elders on the other spell altars could all see it clearly. Zhang Yan was treated with such courtesy by sect leader Qiao and his wife. Many cultivators who were recruited were extremely envious. They were all thinking about how to kill cultivator Xianyu so that they could earn a celestial city like him. At this moment, a Taoist child boarded the flying carriage and said, reporting to sect leader, an envoy from Xianyu has come. He said that he has something important to discuss with sect leader. Sect leader Qiao smiled as if he had expected it. He said in a clear voice, please. At this moment, Zhang Yan stood up and bowed. He said, sect leader Qiao has something to do here. In that case, I will take my leave. Du Shixuan was about to leave as well, but sect leader Qiao said, Sun, stay. Father still has something to say to you. Du Shixuan sat down again. Zhang Yan bowed and rode his light back to the spell altar. Not long after, a thin Daoran wearing a gourd crown came up. He bowed with a Dao salute and said, Protector Xianyu, Mo Shitong, greets sect leader Qiao and Madam. Sect leader Qiao also greeted him politely and asked, fellow Taoist Mo, why did sect leader Yang send you here? Mo Shitong said, sect leader Qiao, I'm here on the orders of our sect leader Yang. I want to redeem the head of Protector Jinling's primordial spirit. Sect leader Qiao said, redeem? Mo Shitong said, that's right. Protector Jinling is the great protector of our sect. Sect leader could not bear to see his spirit being left outside and unable to reincarnate. Thus, he sent me here. I hope that sect leader Qiao will allow us to redeem him on account of the friendship between our 2 sections. Sect leader Qiao grunted and seemed to be considering. Mo Shitong did not dare to rush him and could only wait patiently below. After a while, sect leader Qiao spoke again, fellow Taoist Mo is right. Our 2 sects belong to the same lineage. Protector Jinling's head can be returned to your sect and his corpse can be buried in one piece. As for the primordial spirit, it will be difficult. Since Protector Jinling was killed by Immortal Zhang, he should have the right to dispose of it. Moreover, he is not a disciple of Zhongtai, so I cannot interfere. Mo Shitong hurriedly said, sect leader Qiao, as long as you can release Elder Jinling's primordial spirit, Xianyu will repay you with generous gifts. Sect leader Qiao thought for a while and said, how about this? I can order fellow Taoist Zhang to return Protector Jinling's primordial spirit to you after the duel. What do you think? Xianyu wanted to redeem the primordial spirit of Elder Jinling. As the sect leader Qiao naturally understood the reason behind it. However, since the two sects had yet to determine the victor, it was better to have one more bargaining chip in his hand. Mo Shirtong could tell that sect leader Qiao was unwilling to release Elder Jin Ling's primordial spirit. Helpless, he could only return to the formation to report. He was prepared to be punished, but after Yang Shuyong heard it, he only sneered and waved his hand, dismissing Mo Shirtong. Rong Juanzhong lightly said, "Since Zhong Tai is not willing, it is not a big deal. Later, I will capture a few Elder Zhong Tai and bring them over to exchange for Elder Jin Ling's primordial spirit." He said that he had captured and killed Elder Zhong Tai in such an understated manner, but none of the Xian Yu sect disciples didn't believe him. This was because 3 of Zhong Tai's 9 elders had already died in his hands. Moreover, it seemed that this great cultivator's cultivation had advanced a step further than before. An elder sighed and said, "I, Xian Yu, am very fortunate to have Venerable Rong." Everyone nodded in agreement. At this moment, Chunyu Ji said, "Sect leader, it is getting late. It is time for me, Xian Yu, to send people into battle." Yang Shuyong looked at the sky. Only a few battles had passed and 4 hours had passed. It was nearing dusk. He solemnly bowed to Rong Juanzhong and said, "I will leave everything to you, Venerable Rong." Rong Juanzhong returned the bow and said, "With me here, please do not worry, sect leader." Having said this, he tapped his feet and spread out his sleeves. A ball of rumbling wind and thunder enveloped him as he flew up to the blue sky and stood proudly on the clouds. Seeing him come up, the people under Zhong Tai were shocked and whispered, "Rong Juanzhong?" It was the first time for many of the cultivators outside the sect to see this person. They saw that he was extraordinarily talented and strong. At this moment, as he stood proudly in the sky, the wind blew and the clouds avoided him. From afar, it was as if there was a hole in the sky. Only Du Shixuan looked excited. He turned around and cupped his fists, saying, "Father, since this person has appeared, I will go and meet him." He then leaped into the sky. "Wait!" Sect leader Qiao called out to him. Du Shixuan was so anxious that he almost jumped up and down. He pointed to the sky and said, "Father, you said that this person is my opponent." Madame Zhao said, "Sun, what's the rush? Let your father finish." Sect leader Qiao's expression was solemn as he said, 16 years ago, during the battle, I met Rong Juanzhong. At that time, he did not have this kind of aura. This person's skills have improved again." Madame Zhao was shocked. "Husband, is that true?" Sect leader Qiao nodded slowly. Madame Zhao's expression changed. She was also a nascent soulgenren and understood the crux of it. When a cultivator reached the 3rd level of nascent soul realm, every step forward was extremely difficult. Just like Hui Xian Grand Master who entered the 3rd level of nascent soul realm, he only polished his mana slightly and after a few hundred years, he actually did not improve much. However, Rong Juanzhong was only separated by 16 years, yet sect leader Qiao was able to see that his cultivation had improved. That was no small matter. Sect leader Qiao said in a low voice, "I need to send someone to test him." Madame Zhao said worriedly, "But this person's skills are too high. Who would be willing to fight with him?" While they were discussing countermeasures, Rong Juanzhong spoke from the cloud, "I heard that the Zhongtai sect has a reward for killing me. Anyone who kills me will be rewarded with 3 cities and become sworn brothers with sect master Qiao. I am truly fortunate to be valued so highly by your sect. Today, I will accept 3 challenges from your sect. If anyone can force me to take a step back, the Xian Yu sect will reward him with an immortal city." Chapter 691. Once Rong Juanzhong said this, Xian Yu's side had mixed reactions. Elder Bai sneered, "How arrogant." Elder Yan's expression was tense. Rong Juanzhong must have something to rely on if he dared to say such words. Just as he was thinking of a countermeasure, a disciple ran up the altar and cupped his hands. "Master, sect leader has an order that Rong Juanzhong's cultivation has improved greatly. He ordered Master to find a few people to test the waters." Elder Lin was dissatisfied. "Rong Juanzhong should be the one to fight, why do we have to do it?" Elder Yen stopped him from grumbling. no need to say more, sect leader is right, we need to be careful. No matter how arrogant Du Shixuan was, he was the only one in Zhongtai sect who could match up to Rong Juanzhong. To defeat Xianyu, they needed to rely on him. As for Hui Xian Elder, although he was also a third-degree cultivator, he was not from Zhongtai sect. His presence here was just to add some deterrence. It was wishful thinking to expect him to fight to the death. Elder Bai said, "Senior brother, everyone knows of Rong Juanzhong's reputation, I'm afraid no one will be willing to go." Although they were recruited from outside the sect and all the cultivators inside had to sign the contract, they could not be forced to retreat without a reason. Elder Lin pondered for a while, "Senior brother, I have an idea. Since Rong Juanzhong is so arrogant, why don't we send a few people to see what he does?" Elder Yen thought for a while and said, "That's fine too. Junior brother Lin, go and make the arrangements. Just say that Zhongtai sect will not force anyone to fight to the death with Rong Juanzhong. We will only send a few people to test the waters. If the situation is not good, we will allow them to turn back and we will not blame them." Elder Lin Daoran said, "That will be much easier." Elder Yen thought for a moment, then took out a palm-sized dancing golden copper crane from his sleeve. "Bestow this treasure to them. Say that it can help them escape in times of danger." When Elder Lin saw this dancing crane, he said in shock, "Senior brother, why did you lend this treasure? Let me say something unpleasant, if the people below were to lose the battle, I'm afraid they wouldn't be able to get it back." Elder Yen waved his hand and said, "If we are unwilling to part with our treasures, how can we send people forward? Junior brother, quickly go and make arrangements." Elder Lin still had a look of pity on his face. This dancing golden copper crane had the ability to break through spiritual restrictions. With this treasure, even if he encountered the heaven and earth lock, he could use it to escape. While sighing in pity, he went to the altar next to him. When he arrived, he conveyed Elder Yan's intentions. Immediately, a few people were tempted. If they were to face Rong Juanzhong alone, none of them would be willing. After all, a third-stage realm cultivator's heaven and earth shackle was enough to put them in a dilemma. But if a few of them joined forces, it would be different as they could assist each other. Moreover, he had the help of a magical treasure. If he felt that something was wrong, he could retreat in time. After a while, 3 Taoists in similar Taoist robes came out, each holding a horsetail whisk. The fierce-looking Taoist walked to Elder Lin's side and spread his hands. He chuckled, "I and my 2 brothers are willing to go, Elder Lin." "Elder Lin, you've brought the treasure." This Taoist spoke impolitely, but Elder Lin's face was filled with joy. He bowed and said, "So it's the 3 mystics of Mount Rao Gong. If the 3 of you are willing to come forward, I think Rong Juanzhong won't be able to gain any advantage." As he said that, he handed over the dancing golden copper crane in his hands. Mount Rao Gong was originally the lower house of Qing Xian sect, one of the 5 major sections. But in the past thousands of years, because Qing Xian sect had changed several times, it had actually become an independent sect. The person who spoke was called Tao Quanman. The other 2 were his junior brothers, Shi Chuanzu and Bai Quancheng. According to seniority, the 3 of them were on the same level as the sect master of Qing Xian sect. Tao Quanman swept his horsetail whisk and kept the dancing golden copper crane. He looked back at the figures in the sky and sneered, "Rong Juanzhong, what a great reputation. My 2 junior brothers, follow me to meet him and see what he's capable of." The 3 of them shook their shoulders and turned into rays of light that rushed into the sky. Xian Yu sect master Yang Shuyong saw the 3 of them coming together and immediately sneered. Chunyuji walked over and said, "Sect master, should we send someone up to help?" Yang Shuyong waved his hand and said, "No need. Mount Rao Gong and Qing Xian sect have been separated for 1,000 years. Many of their techniques have been lost, and they are no longer as glorious as they were in the past. Master Rong is more than enough to deal with them." At this moment, on the altar where Zhang Yan was, Xing Fuliu became excited and said, "So it's the 3 fierce Taoists of Mount Rao Gong. This is going to be interesting." Zhang Yan nodded and asked with a smile, Taoist Xing, do you know these 3 Taoists? Xing Fuliu said mysteriously, Taoist Zhang has been staying in the north for a long time, so I'm afraid you don't know. Let's not talk about Shi and Bai, but Tao Quan Man is different. I heard that he once obtained a treasure in the Shaotsang realm. He has always kept it a secret, but ever since he obtained that treasure, he has never lost a battle. Rong Juanzhong is boasting just now, maybe he will suffer a little. After Tao Quan Man stopped in mid-air, he looked at Rong Juanzhong with half-lidded eyes for a while, then casually cupped his hands and said, Taoist Rong, I have a question. What you said just now, is it true? Rong Juanzhong said, of course it is. Tao Quan Man laughed and said, I don't trust you. Why don't you make an oath? Rong Juanzhong made a sound of acknowledgement and suddenly looked over with a sharp gaze. Tao Quan Man looked like he didn't care at all. Rong Juanzhong looked at him and slowly said, everything I said just now, is true. If I break my oath, may the heavens punish me. Tao Quan Man laughed and said, my 2 junior brothers, please protect me. Shi and Bai responded in unison and stood on either side of him. Tao Quan Man said, Jinren Rong, be careful. He took out an item from his sleeve and threw it. It was originally about a foot long, but it suddenly grew to about 10 feet long. This magical treasure was completely black, and it looked like a palace pillar. There were 4 blades on each end of the top and bottom, and they revolved like a whirlwind and danced like a wheel. From time to time, a ball of 7-colored mist would erupt from it. It hadn't even arrived yet, but there was already an extremely strong suction force that tightly pulled Rong Juanzhong's body, causing his clothes to stick tightly to his back. This treasure was called the 100 Refinement Heart-Locking Pillar. Inside it were several types of gang sand collected by the founder of the Shaotsang state from the second heaven. They were known as metal sand, silver ice sand, wind sand, and poison silver sand. As long as a cultivator was grabbed by the pillar, the 4-colored gang sand would rush up and grind him into a pile of mud. When this item was found in the secret chamber of the Shaotsang state, even the master of the realm, Gu Xiangqing, sighed in admiration. When Zhang Yan saw this magical weapon, his eyes flickered. When he went to the Star Stone Sword Duel, he went to the second heaven. If one were to be touched by the fierce gang wind there, their flesh and blood would be gone. The spiritual vigor of the 4-colored cloud was similar to the gang wind. Even if he were to face this magical weapon now, he did not have much confidence in taking it head-on. He had to think of a way to avoid it. Rong Juanzhong just now said that he would not take a step back. It was up to him to deal with it. If he could not win, not only would he give up a celestial city, he would also lose face. Rong Juanzhong's expression was calm. He stood motionless and stared at the 100 Refinement Heart-Locking Pillar for a while. When it got closer, he suddenly shouted. At that moment, Tao Quan Man and the other 2 felt their bodies sink, as if they were hung by a 10,000-kilogram boulder. Tao Quan Man did not panic. This was a technique to seal heaven and earth. The other party was a Yuanying third heaven cultivator. This was within their expectations. He laughed coldly to himself. This technique could restrain them. This technique could restrain them, but it could not restrain a magical weapon. He flipped his wrist and took out the dancing golden crane. He held it in his palm and looked forward with a sinister smile. With this treasure in hand, even if a Dao technique or magical treasure were to attack him now, he could retreat in time. Rong Juanzhong had boasted in front of him, but he could not dodge it without any problems. Elder Lin watched from below, extremely excited. He said, Rong Juanzhong is trapped in his own cocoon. Let's see what he can do. Elder Yen stared at it without blinking. If this treasure could force Rong Juanzhong to dodge, it would definitely dampen Xian Yu's spirit. At that moment, hundreds of cultivators from both sects held their breaths and watched the battle. Even though the 100 Refinement Heart-Locking Pillar was flying slowly, it still arrived in front of Rong Juanzhong. Even now, his expression did not change. Right when the magic treasure was about to collide with him, he suddenly waved his hand, and the magic treasure seemed to be grabbed by something heavy. It suddenly stiffened and stopped in midair. Although it kept twisting and turning, it just couldn't move a single step forward. Shur and Bai saw that things were not going well and reacted quickly. They shouted and each sent out a magical weapon to attack. In an instant, 2 rays of light, one yellow and one white, went straight for Rong Juanzhong. However, when they were within 10 feet of him, they were like the 100 refinement heart-locking pillar. They shook violently and froze in midair. Even the light from the treasure dissipated, revealing 2 cold flying daggers. They buzzed and struggled, but they could not break free from the binding force. Sect leader Qiao's expression changed. He stood up abruptly and blurted out, 10,000 kilograms solidification. Then his expression became uncertain. Master Demi had passed down 3 great magical powers. This 10,000 kilograms solidification was one of them. When this magical power was used, it could freeze everything within 100 feet. For thousands of years, other than the second-generation sect leader in the Xianyu sect, those who could practice this magical power were all Taoist masters. However, they never expected that Rong Juanzhong would be able to practice it again. Tao Quanman was also panicking at that moment. He tried to activate the 100 refinement heart-locking pillar several times, but no matter how many times he made hand seals, it was useless. Although he was reluctant to let go of this treasure, he also knew that if he delayed any longer, he would lose his life. He pinched the dancing golden crane in his hand, and it instantly turned into a golden crane shadow. It protected the 3 of them and was about to escape. However, what shocked him was that although the golden light flapped its wings several times to fly away, it was as if it was stuck in a swamp. It could not move at all. Rong Juanzhong smiled coldly. He did not make any moves. He just gently waved his hand, and there seemed to be an undetectable white light flashing in midair. With a boom, Shi Chuanzu's body exploded and he died. With another finger, Bai Quanqing also died before he could make a sound. Tao Quanman turned pale with fright. He took out several protective treasures and placed them on top of his head. However, just as he finished his action, there was another thunderous sound. When he looked again, he saw that he had exploded along with his treasures. In an instant, not even his bones were left. Sect leader Qiao suddenly lost his composure and stood up. His expression was one of shock and fear. His body trembled slightly. Madame Zhao saw that something was wrong and hurriedly came forward to ask, "Husband?" Sect leader Qiao gently stepped back. He shook his head and walked to the front of the carriage. He asked in a deep voice, "Taoist Master Rong, what kind of thunder technique is this?" Chapter 692. 3 Void 3 Sounds Thunder. When the cultivators on the stage heard this, there was an uproar. Of the 3 great divine abilities passed down by Patriarch Damu, the most profound was the 10,000 kilograms tranquility, and the most powerful was the 3 Void 3 Sound Thunder. However, because this divine ability was not easy to comprehend, it was split into 2 by Grand Master Demi and taught to 2 children, who were later the founders of Zhongtai and Xianyu sections. One of them received the first half and the other received the second half. Zhongtai had used this to deduce the sound-silencing thunder technique, and Xianyu had created it from this 100-fold cloud-shocking lightning. The cultivators of the 2 sects knew that only by combining the 2 scrolls into one could this great technique be used again. However, Rong Juanzhong said that he was using this technique just now. The cultivators of Zhongtai were all shocked. At first, sect leader Qiao was shocked, but now he had calmed down. He thought carefully, then suddenly raised his head and said, "That's not right. When the 3 sounds 3 air thunder is activated, it's invisible and colorless, and it's accompanied by a pleasant sound. Although your thunder technique is similar to the rumors, when you use it, there's white smoke. It's clearly derived from the 100 cloud-shocking thunder." Not to mention the fact that the first volume was still in Zhongtai's hands. According to what he knew, once this divine ability was unleashed, the lightning would rub against each other, and the more it accumulated, the more violent it became, the more it exploded, and in the end, it covered the heavens and the earth. Everywhere the sound of the lightning passed, it became a purgatory, and it was absolutely not something that the noise before his eyes could compare to. Rong Juanzhong's expression did not change as he said, "Sect leader Qiao, you may not know this, but for thousands of years, Xianyu sect has used this sect's thunder technique as its foundation. We have learned from other sects' strong points and have finally achieved this technique. I believe that this technique is already 70% as powerful as the original technique. As long as Xianyu sect continues to produce outstanding talents, we will one day be able to break away from the old ways. It's not impossible for it to surpass Patriarch's technique." On the other side, Elder Yen couldn't bear to listen any longer. He said sternly, "Arrogant. Is the divine ability passed down by the ancestral master something that a junior like you can casually change? This is a treacherous and heinous act." Rong Jun chuckled and said, "What the founding master passed down is the founding master's Tao, not my Tao. Times have changed, why should I, the descendants of the younger generation, cling to the established Tao? I heard that sect master Qiao had long since wanted to pull himself together, but it was you bunch of rotten things who risked your lives to stop him." Like a rubber pillar, it bulged and trembled. Otherwise, there wouldn't be today's situation. When the junior disciples on the stage heard this, some of them were confused, some of them seemed to be deep in thought, and some of them looked confused. Elder Yen saw how Zhang Xian was able to stir up their emotions with just a few words. Instantly, he was both shocked and furious. He repeatedly said, "Shut up! Shut up!" Sect leader Qiao agreed with Rong Juanzhong's words. However, he couldn't say it out loud. He only said coldly, "Since you, Xianyu, have already formed your own clan, how can you steal this name?" Rong Juanzhong looked around. Raising his hand, he casually nodded and said nonchalantly, "Once you, Zhongtai, are dead, who would care?" The surroundings instantly fell into silence. Elder Yen was so angry that his entire body was shaking. He gritted his teeth and said, "Today, either you die, or I die." Sect leader Qiao was silent for a moment before he slowly said, "There's no point in talking too much. Let's see who's the real deal." He returned to his carriage and called Du Shixuan over. In a solemn voice, he asked, "Son, do you have any chance of winning against this person?" Du Shixuan said proudly, "I have a heavenly armor, why should I be afraid of him?" Sect leader Qiao saw that his son was so full of fighting spirit. On one hand, he was gratified, but on the other hand, he was worried. Although Du Shixuan was unstoppable in fights within the sect, Rong Juanzhong was a character that appeared once in 1,000 years. He was far from an ordinary person, and it was hard to predict who would win. Du Shixuan took out a vermilion bird armor from his sleeve and put it on. When he was done, Madame Zhao came up to him and helped him put on the purple phoenix woven golden cloak that she borrowed from the Fengxiang sect. She reminded him, "My son, you must be careful." Du Shixuan said confidently, "Mother, don't worry. Rong Juanzhong has used 2 supernatural powers consecutively, which means that he has already exposed himself. I have a way to take him down." Madame Zhao nodded and said softly, "Go." Du Shixuan took 2 steps forward and took out a formation-breaking wolf fang all that was about 10 feet long. He weighed it in his hands, and with a stomp of his feet, he rushed into the sky with his head held high. When Rong Juanzhong saw that it was him, he looked at him for a while and said, "I have long heard of fellow Taoist Du's name." Du Shixuan pointed the formation-breaking all at him and said, "Rong Juanzhong, I will take your life today. What else do you have to say? Say it quickly." Rong Juanzhong actually looked serious and said, "I do have something to say to you later." Du Shixuan snorted and did not have the patience to talk to him anymore. He suddenly shouted and raised the formation-breaking wolf fang all in his hand. With a whoosh, he smashed it down on Rong Juanzhong's head. A strong gust of wind immediately blew, and Rong Juanzhong's clothes fluttered under the pressure of the attack. Rong Juanzhong remained unmoved. Suddenly, a beam of white light shot out from the top of his head, and a cloud of smoke emerged from it. It looked like a human palm, but upon closer inspection, it was a 3-fingered fork. With a single thought, the fork flew out and collided with the array, breaking all. A loud clanging sound was heard, echoing for a long time. When Headmaster Qiao saw this item, his expression became slightly tense. The Xianyu schools, 3 Guanghui essentials, had 3 transformations: mountain transformation, cloud transformation, and earthquake transformation. When cultivated to a high level, it could be changed according to one's heart, making it impossible for others to grasp it. This 3-fingered fork had been refined by Rong Juanzhong, and could change according to one's heart. In the last battle, the 3 elders of Zhongtai were not able to react in time and were killed before they could use their skills. Rong Juanzhong did not even use up much of his mana. If not for this, he would have been able to fight to a draw. When Du Shixuan saw the 3-fingered fork coming towards him, he raised his heavenly weapon and wanted to push it away. Suddenly, he felt his hand sink, as if he was not holding onto a flying fork, but a mountain. His body was about to fall forward, but he did not panic. With a "hey," he tried to stabilize himself. But at this moment, the 3-fingered fork suddenly turned into a wisp of smoke and flew away. The head of the all became lighter. At this moment, just as he was exerting his strength, there was nothing in front of him, and he could not help but fall backward. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the cloud of smoke circled around his body several dozen times in an instant, and then pulled inwards, actually binding him tightly. He suddenly let out a loud roar and shook his shoulders. His body suddenly grew taller, and in an instant, he became 10 feet tall, and the cloud ropes around him collapsed. Rong Juanzhong's expression did not change. Under the guidance of his mind, the flying fork circled around Du Shixuan and attacked him like a storm. It kept changing, sometimes it was like a mountain pressing down, sometimes it was like a fine silk, and sometimes it was like a landslide. At its most powerful point, in the blink of an eye, it had changed more than 20 times. The people below were frightened, and they broke out in a cold sweat. With such a fierce attack, if they were not careful, they would be defeated and killed. While they were frightened, they were also shocked. Du Shixuan was indeed a strength cultivator. His body was as strong as steel, and he was protected by a precious armor. Even if he was hit repeatedly, he would be fine. If it was them, they would not have been able to withstand it. Although Du Shixuan was not afraid, every time he tried to take a few hits to get closer to Rong Juanzhong, he was pushed back by the flying fork. Up until now, the distance between the two of them was getting farther and farther. At this moment, he was getting impatient. He kept the formation breaking all on his back, and with a surge of spiritual vigor, a ray of divine light appeared in his eyes. His eyes could see through the illusions of spiritual vigor, and at this moment, he could see all the changes in the 3-fingered fork clearly. Finding an opening, he punched, and with a loud bang, the cloud that was still changing was dispersed. Then, he took a step forward and turned into a ball of red flames, rushing towards Rong Juanzhong. Elder Yen snorted and shook his head. "My son, you can't keep your composure. Your body is as strong as steel, so what if you get hurt a few times? If you keep this magical power, you can use it at a critical moment, and you can turn the tables. You shouldn't have used it so early." Rong Juanzhong's eyes narrowed. Strength cultivators usually did not have as long a time as Qi cultivators. He wanted to use the exquisite changes in the treasure to trap Du Shixuan and slowly exhaust his mana. Then, he would find an opportunity to kill him. However, Du Shixuan could see through the changes, so he could only change his strategy. He thought for a while and came up with a countermeasure. His fingers pointed forward, and he did not hesitate to use his mana to cast the tremor formula. Du Shixuan didn't have a suitable method to deal with these changes, and he could only receive them head-on. However, these attacks were extremely violent, and he was shaken to the point of retreating repeatedly. When he finally stopped, he'd already been pushed a few kilometers away. Rong Juanzhong flicked his sleeve again, and a black-furred spirit monkey jumped out from it. This monkey was extremely agile. With a few leaps, it jumped in front of Du Shixuan and scratched his face. Du Shixuan repeatedly waved his awl a few times, wanting to chase the spirit monkey away. However, after a few attempts, the spirit monkey easily evaded his attacks. Whenever he ignored it, the spirit monkey would come up and dig his eyes, scratch his face, or hug his legs and waist. Impatient, he silently recited a mantra and suddenly clenched his fist. There was a loud crack in midair, and the spiritual monkey's body shook. Blood flowed from its 7 orifices, and it froze. With another sweep of the awl, the monkey was smashed into pieces with a bang. However, Rong Juanzhong was indifferent. With this opportunity, he pointed his finger, and the flying fork flew high up into the sky. He chanted a mantra, and instantly, it turned into clouds of smoke. It slowly swirled, and layers of smoke piled up. Not long after, it became a towering mountain. He turned his hand and pressed it down, and it came crashing down. This mountain covered a radius of 30 miles. At this moment, it came crashing down, and even the sky darkened. Du Shixuan looked around and saw that the surrounding mountains were all mountains, and Rong Juanzhong was firmly guarding the escape route. There was no way to avoid it. He raised his head and looked up, but he was not afraid at all. Suddenly, he let out a fierce shout and shook his body. His body expanded again, and in one fell swoop, he reached a height of 500 feet. Both his feet stood on the ground, and he raised his hands. With a rumbling sound, his knees bent, and his body sank down slightly. In one move, he was able to support the misty cloud mountain. Just as he was about to push it away, Rong Juanzhong stretched out his hand. Suddenly, a jasper hammer flew towards his back. The momentum was too fast, and he could not use his divine weapon to block it. Relying on his sturdy body, he used his shoulder to block it. With a bang, he let out a muffled groan, and the armor on his shoulder shattered. Rong Juanzhong saw this and shook his head. He said, "Friend Du, why are you risking your life? Do you know that your father, Qiao Huanzhuan, and your mother, Zhao Ru, already have a 5-year-old son? The person who will take over the position of sect leader in the future will definitely be him. Today, they are just sending you to your death. Isn't it not worth it for you to die for Zhongtai?" P.S. Chapter 693. Du Shixuan was startled at first, then he said angrily, "Shut up. How can you call out the names of my parents?" Madame Zhao's face turned pale and her body swayed. She gripped the armrest tightly and said with a trembling voice, "How did the Xianyu cult know about this?" Sect leader Qiao, on the other hand, was much calmer. He merely furrowed his brows and sighed, "I only hope that Suna will not be moved by these words." Although there was a saying that the Zhongtai sect leader's position would be succeeded by the son after the father's death, it was still too early to talk about succession. If Du Shixuan could defeat Rong Juanzhong and unite the two factions, his reputation would be unparalleled in the faction. It would only be a matter of time before he became the next sect leader. Although he had his own plans, he hadn't had the time to tell Du Shixuan about it. Now he was worried that Rong Juanzhong wasn't his biological son. He was afraid that Rong Juanzhong wouldn't be able to tell and would be disturbed by Rong Juanzhong's words. That would be very bad. On the altar far away, Luo Dongchuan, who was watching the battle, lowered his head and thought. Suddenly he looked over and stared at Hui Xian elder. After a long while, he then said, "Hui Xian fellow, don't tell me you are the one who spread the news?" Hui Xian elder's expression did not change and said calmly, "If Du Shixuan's Dao heart is firm, he will not be taken advantage of by others. What does it matter if Daoren says it or not?" Luo Dongchuan laughed and said, "Fellow Daoist, I admire your methods." Du Shixuan knew that Rong Juanzhong's words were meant to disturb his state of mind, but he was still a little upset and could not keep his composure. With a loud roar, he raised his head and a mouthful of true fire that he had cultivated for hundreds of years appeared in his abdomen. He circulated his qi and spat it out. The huge mountain above was scorched by this fire, and it actually showed signs of collapsing. Rong Juanzhong could sense the immense power contained within the fire. He was afraid that he would be at a disadvantage if he fought it head-on, so he immediately removed the spell on the three-fingered trident and called it back. When it fell into his hands, he examined it and his heart skipped a beat. The fire had only touched a little, but the three-fingered fork was already somewhat damaged. It was no longer as smooth as before. His expression couldn't help but change slightly. This flame was so powerful that if it touched his body, it would be almost impossible to resist. There was only this lump. It could take his life. He thought to himself, I've heard of such a strange fire before. Could it be the Shaotsung stage's true fire of fierce qi? If that was the case, then where did Du Shixuan's strength path cultivation technique come from? It seems to make sense now. Thinking of this, the look in his eyes deepened. Du Shixuan saw that the true fire was working. The mountain range had already melted and there was nothing blocking his way. He took a deep breath. Then, he spat out a mouthful of true fire. This time, he used Pang Shua's body to activate his divine ability. Thus, when the fire started, the entire mountain was covered in raging flames. Even the cultivators from the two sects who were watching the battle were affected. They hurriedly activated the forbidden formations on their respective altars, but even so, they still felt the heat wave burning their skin and a dull pain. Rong Junzhong was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. The pressure he felt was 100 times greater than the others. His expression turned serious. He waved his sleeves and 2 golden gongs flew out. They spun above his head and became bigger and bigger until they became the size of a mountain. Then, he used his supernatural power to face the attack. When Elder Lin saw this item, he exclaimed, "Isn't this the treasure that senior brother Deng carried with him in the past?" Elder Bai's gaze was complicated. He sighed and said, "The item of my Zhongtai is used against the cultivators of my Zhongtai sect." How sad and hateful. In the previous 2 battles between the 2 sects, Xian Yu was the winner. Not only did they lose many elders and cultivators, even many of the treasures passed down by the seniors in the sect fell into the hands of the other party. This pair of 1,000 jade golden gongs was one of them. At this moment, the oncoming flames crashed into the surface of the gong with a loud bang. The golden gong shook violently a few times, as if it was letting out a mournful wail. After holding on for a few breaths, it seemed to be unable to bear the burden. With a cracking sound, a huge hole was torn open. Countless streams of flames rushed out from the hole, constantly tearing and expanding the hole. This treasure suffered such heavy damage and lost its spirituality. Under the continuous impact of the fierce fire, it finally could not withstand it and broke into pieces. Rong Junzhong took out an iron tablet from his sleeve and threw it into the air to block the fire. However, the fire was too strong. The iron tablet could only withstand the fire for a few breaths before it met the same fate as the pair of gongs. However, his expression was still calm. He continued to take out treasures and threw them into the air one by one to resist the fire. By the time the true fire was getting weaker, he had already thrown out 7 treasures, and 3 of them were profound artifacts. Such extravagant behavior made many people's eyes twitch. Elder Yan's expression was unusually ugly. These 7 treasures originally belonged to the Zhongtai sect. However, at this moment, they were used by Rong Junzhong to protect himself. Then, he watched as they were destroyed. It was really distressing. Although Du Shixuan's real fire was formidable, every time he used it, it would decrease by a bit. Moreover, the consumption of his magical power was not small either. Gradually, he could no longer support his huge body and had no choice but to withdraw his technique and return to his original body. Unavoidably, he looked slightly dispirited. This slight change was immediately noticed by Rong Junzhong. Without waiting for Du Shixuan to make a move, Rong Junzhong activated the Heaven and Earth Lock technique. When this technique was used, Du Shixuan's body suddenly sank and he could not help but groan. The Heaven and Earth Lock technique was originally not that important to a cultivator of strength path like him. However, now that he was exhausted, the restriction was much greater. Rong Junzhong saw that he could not stand steadily and immediately seized the opportunity. He raised his hand and a rainbow light shot out, sending the jasper hammer towards him again. Du Shixuan raised his spirits and shouted. He took out his divine weapon to block the hammer. Thousands of golden stars appeared on the hammer and it was slapped to the side. However, the jasper hammer did not go far before it flew back. At this moment, the three-fingered fork also flew over and attacked from both sides. Du Shixuan had just now vented his anger. At this moment, he had calmed down. He took out his divine weapon and calmly dealt with it. He was no longer in a hurry to rush forward. He thought to himself, if I want to kill this person, I need to find the right time to attack. It won't be like just now where I return empty-handed. To deal with Rong Junzhong, he had prepared for a long time. His techniques were not limited to what he had just seen. He wanted to slowly accumulate his mana and kill his enemy in one blow. He did not take the initiative to attack, and Rong Junzhong only used 2 magical weapons to deal with him. Both sides were wary of each other, and the battle was in a stalemate. Xing Fuliu could not help but feel disappointed. He said, that Rong Junzhong is lucky that he did not get burned to death just now. Zhang Yan shook his head and said, Rong Junzhong is also someone who has been through hundreds of battles. Compared to him, fellow Du is a little lacking. Just now, when you activated the smelting flame, you were a little hasty and impatient. The timing you chose was also a little imprudent. If Rong Junzhong did not defend himself, I believe he would have a way to escape and would not have died. Xing Fuliu shook his sleeves and said, from what fellow Zhang said, it seems like you can take down this person. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and did not answer. Xing Fuliu thought that he was convinced by his words and could not help feeling proud. He said, Spiritual Master Zhang, young sect master seems to be at a disadvantage now, but it is not difficult for him to hold on. As long as young sect master gets a chance, there is still a chance to turn defeat into victory. Zhang Yan agreed with what he said. But even so, Du Shixuan's situation was not optimistic. Up until now, Rong Junzhong had not used the 10,000 kilograms calming, or his sect's unique lightning technique. He only relied on his sect's Xian technique to deal with Du Shixuan. Zhang Yan could roughly guess his intentions. This person most likely didn't want to waste too much of his Fa Li in this battle. As to why he did so, he guessed that it was because he had scruples about Hui Xian Elder at the side and had no choice. Hui Xian Elder was also a Yuanying 3rd-tier cultivator. Regardless of whether he would go into battle or not, just sitting there was a huge threat. That was why Rong Junzhong had to hold back when dealing with Du Shixuan to prevent him from taking advantage. And when he was dealing with Tao Quan Man and the other two, he used 2 supernatural powers consecutively. It was on purpose to deter this person and make him watch from the sidelines. Zhang Yan judged that since Rong Junzhong did this, he would definitely not let the battle drag on for too long. That would not be in line with his original intentions. Maybe he would use a risky move and try to get rid of his opponent in the shortest time possible. At the same time, this was what Du Shixuan wanted. Zhang Yan looked up with a deep gaze. It would not be long before the outcome would be decided. The two of them fought for another moment without any danger. Du Shixuan unknowingly got closer to Rong Junzhong. Looking at the distance between them, they were already within 700 feet. He had a supernatural power called treading on 3 mountains. Even under the heaven and earth imprisonment, he could still barely activate it. He thought that if he used it now, he would have some chance of winning. If he missed it now, he did not know if there would be such a chance next time. After making up his mind, he waved his divine weapon without hesitation and pushed the 3-fingered fork and the jasper hammer away. He took a step forward and suddenly turned into a ray of light. With a shocking momentum, he charged towards where Rong Junzhong was. In an instant, he was within 10 feet of him. But when he moved forward again, his body froze as if he was pressed down by a mountain. He was actually fixed on the spot. Du Shixuan's eyes narrowed. He knew that he was being controlled by the absolute freeze. But since Rong Junzhong used this supernatural power, it could be seen that he had no other way to fight back. With this judgment, he became excited. With a roar, his body lengthened again. He raised the formation-breaking Wolf Fang Al and swung it heavily towards Rong Junzhong's head. At the same time, The stellar energy whirlpool around his body stirred and wrapped around his opponent tightly, not allowing him to escape. But at this moment, an object flew from below and attacked him from behind. Du Shixuan felt his hair stand on end as if he was in extreme danger. But if he dodged at this moment, all his previous efforts would be wasted. At this moment, there was no time for hesitation. Thus, he gritted his teeth and did not change the direction of the divine weapon in his hand. When sect leader Qiao saw this object, his expression changed. He did not care about the rules of the battle and hurriedly shouted, "My son, quickly dodge." Rong Junzhong seemed to be trapped by the stellar energy whirlpool and could not move at all. Just as the wolf Fang Al was a few feet away from hitting him, his body suddenly became blurry and he flew backwards like a light smoke. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed and he said in a low voice, "Return to truth." At this moment, he heard a loud shout. When he looked again, Du Shixuan had already fallen from midair. Not only that, half of his body had been transformed by a ray of light. Chapter 694. The people from Zhongtai could see clearly that the thing that hit Du Shixuan was the 100 refinements heart-locking pillar that originally belonged to Taoist. After Taoist was killed, the magic treasure fell into Rong Junzhong's hands. Although this item was powerful, it was very slow. Even if a cultivator who was not good at escape techniques encountered it, as long as he was prepared, he would be able to avoid it. If Du Shixuan did not want to kill his enemy in one strike, he would not have been hit so easily. Rong Junzhong had obviously expected this and deliberately used himself as bait to lure Du Shixuan to fight with his life. Only then was he able to defeat his opponent. After Du Shixuan fell from the sky, he landed at the foot of the mountain and created a pit. At this moment, he only had one hand and one leg left. His body was bleeding all over and his charred internal organs and armor had fused together. He looked very miserable and badly mutilated. After a while, his eyes suddenly opened, revealing a bright light. He supported himself with one hand and propped himself up. He used his heart to examine himself and understood his situation. In order to resist the four-colored astral sand, his entire body's magic power was almost exhausted. Fortunately, he had the purple phoenix woven gold cloak to block it, so he was not locked by the 100 refining stake. Otherwise, even with his strength path mysterious technique, he would still be turned into ashes. He looked at his left shoulder. After a while, a red light spurted out from the wound. After a few breaths, the light dissipated and an arm grew out. Just as he was about to restore his body and left leg to their original state, a white rainbow suddenly pierced through the sky and firmly nailed him to the ground with a pu sound. Du Shixuan coughed out a mouthful of blood and looked down. He saw that the three-fingered fork was in between his chest and abdomen. He grabbed it with one hand and supported himself on the ground, refusing to fall. His other hand grabbed the handle of the fork and wanted to pull it out. However, after a few attempts, he was blocked by the magic treasure's waves of spiritual vigor and could not do as he wished. At this moment, the top of his head darkened. He stopped and looked up. Rong Junzhong was slowly descending from the sky. When he was near, he waved his hand. After looking at him a few times, he waved his hand, and with a flash of light, the 100 refinements locking pillar flew over. It was hanging by the side. Du Shixuan's eyes narrowed. So long as this magic treasure falls. He was about to die on the spot, so he stopped struggling and sneered, "What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for?" Rong Jun raised his hand. The 100 refining heart-locking pillar gradually emitted a four-colored glow. There was a cold smile on Du Shixuan's face, but there was not the slightest trace of fear on his face. Over at the Pu Lao flying carriage, Madame Zhao's face was as white as a sheet. She clutched sect leader Qiao's arm tightly and said in a trembling voice, "Husband, quick, save Sun, Sect master Qiao sighed softly and said from afar, "Sage Rong, you, Xianyu, have won this formation. Can you let my son go?" He did not expect the other party to stop. No matter how he looked at it, his stepson was a target that the Xianyu sect had to eliminate first. As long as he died, the biggest obstacle in the other party's way would no longer exist. Who would have thought that Rong Juanzhong would actually stop his hand when he heard this? His expression seemed to be seriously considering it. He could not help but be startled. Madame Zhao could not help but feel a sense of hope. Not long after, Rong Juanzhong turned around and said, "Since Sect Master Qiao has spoken, it is not that I cannot let Du Zhen go. However, you have to do two things for me." Sect Master Qiao said cautiously, "Please speak." Rong Juanzhong said, "First place. I, Xian Yu, will win the next round. As for second place." He turned his head and looked at an altar that was shrouded in mist. He raised his voice and said, "Fellow Daoist Hui Xian, you are not one of Zhongtai's people. Why do you have to work so hard for Zhongtai?" There was no sound coming from the altar. Rong Juanzhong did not take it seriously and continued to say, "I know that you have received a favor from Zhongtai in the past. If you are willing to no longer interfere in the matter between our two sects, I can let Jinren Du go and repay this favor for you. What do you think?" At this moment, Elder Envoy Chunyuji said, "Sect Master, if Zhongtai agrees to let Du Shixuan go, wouldn't that be releasing a tiger back into the mountains?" Yang Shuyong said, "Sage Rong knows what he is doing. If he can defeat Du Xiaoye once, he can do it again. Even if he goes back, he won't be able to do anything. However, Hui Xian is not simple and is somewhat difficult to see through. It would be best if we can make him watch from the sidelines." There was no sound coming from the mist for a long time. Rong Juanzhong did not show any impatience and waited calmly. After about 5 minutes, the thick mist around the altar gradually dissipated. Patriarch Fa Huixian's figure appeared from within. He looked indifferent on the surface, but he was secretly delighted. The other party's suggestion was exactly what he wanted. Only when Zhongtai was forced to the end of the line could the Python tribe take advantage of the situation. But at this moment, he made a difficult expression and looked at Sect Master Qiao. He said, "What does fellow Daoist think?" Madame Zhao begged, "Husband." Sect Master Qiao closed his eyes and thought for a while. He sighed and said, "It is difficult for me to decide alone. I need to discuss with the elders." He found a disciple and said, "Go to Elder Yen and ask him what he thinks." The disciple hurriedly flew up and rushed to the altar where the elders were. Just as he was about to speak, Elder Yen beat him to it and said, "Go back and tell the sect leader that these two requests can be approved." The disciple was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed and went back to report. Elder Lin was very surprised and said anxiously, "Senior brother, Du Xiaoye always goes against us. What's the use of saving him?" Elder Yen scolded coldly, "Fool, do you know what time it is now? When the nest is overturned, how can there be intact eggs? If Du Xiaoye dies, we won't have a good ending either." In reality, what he wanted the most was to see both Rong and Du Xiaoye suffer. But if Du Shixuan was killed just like that, how could Zhongtai find a second person to go against Xianyu? Moreover, Xianyu's actions had already involved the battle between the two orthodoxies. This was something he could not tolerate. Compared to this, everything else could be thrown aside. Elder Lin was not convinced and said, "Senior brother, that Daoist Hui Xian might be able to fight with Rong Juanzhong. Why do you think so highly of that Du Xiaoye?" Elder Bai sighed, "Junior brother Lin, that Daoren Hui Xian is just an outsider. He looks to be on good terms with us. Actually, he appears to be united on the surface, but he is divided at heart. We can't expect him to go all out for my Zhongtai. Moreover, Du Shixuan is a strength path cultivator. As long as he can be saved and recuperated, he might be able to fight with Rong Juanzhong again in the future." After Sect Master Qiao received the reply, he did not know whether he was sad or happy. He bowed towards the distance and said, "Daoist Hui Xian, I have troubled you this time." Hearing this, the Hui Xian ancestor already knew his choice. His heart was set. He said to Rong Juanzhong, "Jinren Rong, please let him go." Rong Juanzhong did not go back on his words. He waved his sleeves and kept the 3-fingered fork and the 100 refining heart-locking pillar. He threw a sentence. Your sect can come and pick him up. He then turned and returned to Xianyu. Without waiting for orders, several disciples immediately went down the mountain. It didn't take long. After a short while, they brought Du Shixuan back. He was already unconscious. Looking at his terrible condition, Madame Zhao panicked and asked, "How is my son? How is my son?" Sect Master Qiao was still calm. He went forward to check and frowned. Madame Zhao could not help but become nervous and said with a trembling voice, "Husband, do not scare me. Did Rong Juanzhong do something?" Sect Master Qiao shook his head, "Madam, do not worry. Sun has only used up too much mana and essence. It is not a big problem. I am afraid that he will not be able to fight for a while." Madame Zhao could not help but feel relieved. But thinking that without Elder Hui Xian and her own son could not fight, it could be said that the chances of winning this battle were slim. Sect Master Qiao found 2 disciples and ordered them to send Du Shixuan to settle down. Then, without saying a word, he returned to the carriage and sat there silently, as if thinking of a solution. Madame Zhao saw that his brows were shrouded with a layer of worry. She bit her lower lip and hesitated if she should tell him about the Python tribe. This tribe was based in the North Sea and there was a Grotto Heaven Almighty in the sect. If they could get their help, it would not be difficult to deal with Xianyu. After a few moments of hesitation, just as she was about to speak, Sect Master Qiao suddenly said, "Someone, invite fellow Taoist Tsing over." Immediately, a child beside him answered and left. After a short while, a good-looking Taoist came to the carriage and bowed, "Tsing Tsongluan greets Sect Master Qiao." Sect Master Qiao nodded. Now that Zhongtai was in danger, he did not need to be polite and said bluntly, "I invited fellow Taoist here because I want to use the stargazing book to divine where is the way out of this battle." Tsing Tsongluan was already prepared and said, "I will naturally obey, it is just that." Sect Master Qiao knew what he was worried about. Without waiting for him to finish, Sect Master Qiao said, "I can swear right now that fellow Taoist Tseng has opened the stargazing book. In the future, if there is a disaster, Zhongtai will use all the power of the sect to protect you. If I violate this oath, I will be destroyed by heaven and earth." With this promise, Tsing Tsongluan was slightly relieved. He cupped his hands and said, "Sect Master Qiao, please dismiss your attendants." Sect Master Qiao waved his hand and everyone, including Madame Zhao, retreated. Then, he cast a spell and set up a restriction on the carriage, protecting the 2 of them inside. After everything was in place, he said, "Fellow Taoist, you can start the spell now." Tsing Tsongluan apologized and took a few steps back. He took out an exquisite bamboo scroll from his sleeve, untied the belt, and slowly opened it. When the bamboo slip was completely exposed, suddenly a white light soared up 3 feet high, with thousands of talismans appearing on it. The talismans revolved in the air, as fast as flying stars. Streaks of dazzling light shot out like sharp arrows. He endured the intense pain and read for a few breaths. Then, he felt the blood in his body flowing in reverse, his vision darkened, and his breathing became rapid. The longer he read this stargazing book, the greater the disaster he would face in the future. However, what happened just now was of great importance, so he did not dare to put it away immediately. He forced himself to read for a long time. Suddenly, he cried out and fell on his back. Sect Master Qiao was shocked. He got down from the carriage and helped him up. Tsing Tsongluan regained his composure. While his mind was still clear, he grabbed Sect Master Qiao's arm and said weakly, "Sect Master Qiao, I received a comment that can help Zhongtai get out of trouble." Sect Master Qiao's expression also tensed up. He asked, "What is it?" Tsing Tsongluan took a breath and said, "The comment is put in a desperate situation and you will be reborn." Sect Master Qiao pondered for a while and wanted to ask more. However, after Tsing Tsongluan said the comment, he relaxed and fell into a deep sleep. Sect Master Qiao frowned deeply. "Put in a desperate situation and you will be reborn?" He could not help but look into the distance. Rong Juanzhong had won all 3 battles. Xian Yu had occupied 3 more peaks and was setting up a restriction there. Zhang Yan's previous advantage of turning the tables had been lost. Xian Yu had actually sealed the way out. This place was already a dead end. Chapter 695. Rong Jun returned to the Xian Yu array. Chief Yang Shuyong welcomed him and laughed. Sage Rong has won 3 rounds in a row. Our Xian Yu array is a success. Rong Jun clasped his hands together and said, Sect leader Jinren, only when the restrictive spell is set up can it be considered foolproof. Yang Shuyong nodded and said, You're right. I've already made arrangements. In another hour, everything will be settled. The 2 sects will be united as one, and Master Rong will take the lead. Chen Yuji came up at this time and said, Sect leader, do you want to send someone to challenge again? Rong Junzhong looked over and said, There is no need for that. Let's just follow the previous plan. Chen Yuji stood motionless, only looking at Yang Shuyong. Yang Shuyong scolded, Aren't you going to follow Jinren Rong's instruction? Chun Yuji said yes, bowed, and strode away. Yang Shuyong chuckled and said, I'm here to watch a good show. On the flying carriage of Pu Lao, sect leader Qiao could not understand the message no matter how hard he thought about it. However, this matter was not something he could decide on his own, so he ordered someone to invite a few elders over to discuss it together. However, after pondering for a long time, the 2 of them still couldn't find a clue. Elder Qin muttered softly, putting oneself in a hopeless situation to survive, but where is the path to survival? He took a few steps outside and looked at the mountain range in the distance. He muttered to himself, could it be that the way out is outside and not inside? When Madame Zhao heard this, her heart trembled. She immediately thought of the Python tribe and said, could it be that this is heaven's will, that the Python tribe should help me? At this moment, a rainbow light suddenly shot over from where Xian Yu was. All 3 of them, including sect leader Qiao, felt their hearts sink. Now that Xian Yu had sent someone over, it seemed like he was going to fight again. If it was someone else, it would be fine, but if Rong Junzhong came again, should they send someone to stop him? Elder Lin said with a lack of confidence, even if Rong Junzhong comes again, what are we afraid of? At worst, we'll just swarm him together. Do you think he can beat us all together? Elder Yen shook his head and said, if several people attack together, that Xian Yu definitely wouldn't sit by and watch. It would just be a chaotic battle. I, Zhong Tai, also don't have much of a chance. Elder Bai sighed, senior brother is right. Now, even if I want to go all out, I can't. If those cultivators from outside the sect see that my Zhong Tai sect is declining, how many of them will really put in effort? If it wasn't limited to the contract. The Dharma assembly had yet to end. No one is allowed to leave without permission. I'm afraid they've already run away. As he spoke, the Xianyue mountain cultivator had already arrived. Unexpectedly. He did not come here to ask for a fight. Instead, he said loudly, Sect leader Qiao, elders Zhong Tai, the sect leader ordered me to come here to ask a question. Jinren Du has been defeated. Is Zhong Tai willing to admit defeat in this fight? Without waiting for a reply, he turned around and said to the cultivators on the 2 altars on both sides, fellow Taoists, I, Xianyu, will seal the exit of the Sleeping Star Mountain tomorrow. I have no enmity with you. If you want to leave, you can leave quickly tonight. Don't make a mistake. Hearing this, the cultivators outside the sect were in an uproar. If they were facing someone head-on, they would still have some confidence. However, if there was a restriction array set up around them, they would be trapped here. They only came for benefits. How would they be willing to fall into a hopeless situation with Zhong Tai? At this moment, a chime was heard. Everyone looked over in shock and saw Hui Xian Grand Master riding a cloud to the bottom of the flying carriage. He bowed and said, Daoist brother Qiao, since Daoren has already said that he won't interfere with the matter between the 2 sects, it's not convenient for me to stay here for long. I'll take my leave now. Sect leader Qiao was helpless. He knew that he had the intention to leave and he could not stop him. He sighed and returned the greeting, fellow Taoist, please leave. I won't send you off. Elder Yen snorted coldly. Hui Xian Grand Master pretended not to hear it. He glanced at Madame Zhao vaguely before waving his sleeves and leaving with the children and disciples. When Yang Shuyong saw this, he was overjoyed. Good, good. Hui Xian's departure will completely shake people's hearts. Everyone can see that Zhong Tai's power is gone. Sage Rong really has a good plan. Rong Juanzhong smiled faintly and said, although many of the cultivators that Zhong Tai invited are dead or injured, there are still over 10 people left. Among them, there is no lack of Yuanying second-grade cultivators like Priest Zhang. If you say that these people are willing to serve Zhong Tai, I don't believe it. Now that we have opened up a path, if things go smoothly, we can get rid of half of them without any bloodshed. If Zhong Tai doesn't stop them, they will make a ruckus without us going forward. Just as he expected, after Hui Xian left, all the cultivators felt that it was impossible for Zhong Tai to defeat Xianyu, and the rewards could only be obtained by killing the Xianyu sect's elders, but where would such an opportunity come from? It was already good enough that they did not get implicated by Zhong Tai. They were all thinking of how to get out of this muddy pit as soon as possible. However, with the restriction of the spell contract, they could not leave at will. After a discussion, they decided to send one person to negotiate with sect leader Qiao so that they could leave. Someone suggested that Sage Shang is a Yuanying second-grade cultivator. His cultivation is the highest here. Why don't we ask him to come forward? As soon as this was said, everyone agreed. Not to mention Zhang Yan's cultivation, just now, when he killed Elder Jin Ling, it did not take him much effort. It was clear that he was very strong in fights of magical powers. It was suitable for him to take the lead now. The person who spoke first said again, I wonder which Taoist friend is acquainted with Sage Shang. Ask him to come forward. At this moment, a junior female disciple muttered, isn't this treachery? Hearing this, everyone looked at her with unfriendly eyes. The female disciple was so scared that she shrunk her body. Beside her, a voluptuous woman shook her head and stood out, saying, I have met Sage Shang once before. I am willing to go and talk to him. When everyone heard that this woman was acquainted with Zhang Yan, their expressions softened and they all said, we'll be counting on you, fellow Taoist. The female cultivator said a few polite words and used her escape art to fly toward Zhang Yan's spell altar. When she arrived at the boundary, she landed on the ground and greeted him with a sweet smile, fellow Taoist Zhang, do you still remember me after we parted at the Divine House Mountain? Zhang Yan looked at her and immediately recognized her. When he went to open the earthly fire heavenly cauldron, he passed by this woman's cave abode and had a few words with her. He said, so it's Lady Che. You also came to the spell assembly. Why didn't I see you when you signed the contract? Lady Che smiled embarrassedly and said, Sage Shang also knows that I come from the heretical school. I have many enemies outside, so I changed my appearance to avoid a lot of trouble. Zhang Yan nodded and asked, Lady Che, what brings you here today? Lady Che hesitated for a moment before telling him what everyone wanted. Zhang Yan smiled and said, please forgive me, I can't agree to this. He didn't agree, but Xing Fuliu, who was standing beside him, did. He joined Du Shixuan because he had offended Elder Lin. Du Shixuan's fate was unknown. Although he didn't want to part with the items on the list, he didn't want to stay here any longer, so he said, fellow Taoist Che, I am willing to speak for you. What do you think? Lady Che thought for a moment. Apart from Zhang Yan, he was also the only one who won a round. He was also the only person who had won a round, so he was barely suitable. He said, Taoist Xing is willing to step up. That is exactly what I want, but I can't make the decision alone. Why don't you come with me and discuss it with the other Taoists? Xing Fuliu said impatiently, then what are you waiting for? Let's go. Lady Che bowed to Zhang Yan, and under Xing Fuliu's urging, she hurriedly took her leave. Xing Fuliu first went to the cultivators. Seeing that he recommended himself and was indeed capable, they agreed to let him lead the way. He hurried back to where Pu Lao's flying carriage was. Unexpectedly, Sect leader Qiao was not angry, but said with a calm expression, "Since you all have the intention to leave, I, Zhong Tai, will not force you to leave." Xing Fuliu was overjoyed. Afraid that Sect Master Qiao would change his mind, he immediately said, "Sect Master, please give us your seal and remove the contract." Sect Master Qiao looked at Elder Yen. The latter expressionlessly took out the contract from his sleeve and said, "Take it. You can do whatever you want with it." Xing Fuliu snatched it and used his true power to turn it into dust. Then, without saying goodbye, he stomped his feet and flew down from the altar. He was secretly delighted. "Now that I've done this, I've received a huge favor. Where else can I find such a good deal?" When he passed by the altar he came from just now, he saw that Zhang Yan was still there. He sneered and thought, "If you want to stay here and die with Zhong Tai, it's up to you. I won't be accompanying you." After Xing Fuliu left, Elder Lin grumbled, "Senior Marshal Brother, why did you let those people go? How can I, Zhong Tai, fight against Xian Yu?" Elder Yen sighed, "Junior Marshal Brother, Xian Yu is using a psychological tactic. If he doesn't succeed, he will be bound by the contract. Although he won't turn hostile immediately, he might bite back when Xian Yu comes to attack. It's better to let him go." Elder Lin was stunned for a long time. Then, he sat down dejectedly. At this moment, streaks of light flew up from the spell altars on both sides, heading towards the other side. Elder Yen looked at the people leaving and said calmly, "Sect Master, now that these people are gone, Xian Yu will definitely come to attack tomorrow." Sect Master Qiao sighed, "I understand what Elder Yen said, but I am not willing to admit defeat." Elder Yen nodded. Not to mention the others, they were the Sect Master and the Great Elder. No matter what, they were people that Xian Yu must eliminate. Therefore, they had no way out and had to fight to the death. Madame Zhao could not help but say, "No, there is another way that can help Zhong Tai get through this." Sect Master Qiao was not surprised at all. He said lightly, "Madam, are you talking about the Python tribe?" Madame Zhao raised her head in disbelief and asked with a trembling voice, "Husband, you know about it?" Sect Master Qiao said in a low voice, "Even if I don't know about the demon cultivators coming to Hope Sound Mountain, how can I hide it from spiritual Master Zheng?" Madame Zhao looked at him in shock and asked softly, "Then what do you think?" Sect Master Qiao waved his hand and said resolutely, "There is no need to talk about this anymore." Back then, the 5 sects agreed not to let the Python tribe enter Dongsheng without permission. If we do this, even if we can get through this, the 3 sects of the south will have an excuse to come and punish us. We cannot do this. Even if he lost this battle and lost his life, he still had his people and disciples. At most, he could hide in the south and there would be a chance for him to be reborn. However, if the Python tribe entered Dongsheng, the 3 sects of the south would find an excuse to attack them. Then, there would be no place for them in Dongsheng continent. Madame Zhao lowered her eyes and did not speak anymore. Elder Yen listened and nodded. He thought, Sect Master is right. How can we be on the same side as the cold-blooded worms? He looked down and was surprised. Why is there another Taoist who has not left? Everyone looked over and saw a handsome Taoist. Not only did he not leave, but he was also flying towards them. After a while, he landed on the altar. Sect Master Qiao could not help but stand up. He was surprised and said, "So it is Spiritual Master Zhang. Why are you not leaving?" Zhang Yan looked around, cupped his fist and said, "I'm here to lend you a hand." Sect Master Qiao was excited. Everyone left Zhong Tai, but Zhang Yan was the only one who was willing to stay. He sighed and said, "Fellow Taoist, you are so righteous. How should I thank you?" Chapter 696. Zhang Yan didn't mince words about his purpose of coming, but Sect Master Qiao didn't think so. Under Xian Yu's series of attacks, Zhong Tai's sect was already at the end of its rope. Even if there was another person, it wouldn't help the overall situation. If he stood on this side, it would be a narrow escape from death. Sect Master Qiao clasped his hands and bowed to Zhang Yan solemnly. He then turned his body and said, "Fellow Taoist, please get on the carriage and have a chat." Zhang Yan returned the bow with a smile and walked into the carriage. Madame Zhao forced a smile at him while Elder Yan was resting with his eyes closed. When he saw him coming up, he nodded as a greeting. After Sect Master Qiao invited Zhang Yan to take a seat, he also sat down and turned to Elder Yan and Daoren, "Senior brother, please invite all the junior brothers here. I have something to say." Elder Yan was stunned. In these 100 over years, this was the first time Sect Master Qiao called him senior brother. He couldn't help but be dazed for a moment. He slowly stood up and bowed respectfully, "I'll go make the arrangements now." He went out to make the arrangements, and not long after, he saw 10 rays of light flying over. These people were the sect's disciples and the various immortal cities' castellans. It could be said that Zhongtai's sect was bound together for good or bad. Sect Master Qiao looked over. The elites of the sect were all here. After the battle tomorrow, he didn't know how many of them would survive. He sighed deeply and cupped his hands, "Junior brothers, I'm useless and have implicated all of you." Elder Yan sighed, "Junior brother, what are you saying? Ever since you became the sect master, you've never slacked off. Every day, you've put in so much effort to strengthen the sect. If it wasn't for so many mundane matters, based on junior brother's aptitude, I'm afraid you'd have stepped into the 3rd stage realm long ago. Speaking of which, it's all my fault that I'm here today. It's too late to regret." Sect Master Qiao shook his head and said, "Let's not talk about this anymore. Since Xian Yu sealed the mountain and set up the formation, I am not willing to sit and wait for death. I also want to set up a restriction in this mountain so that I can compete with Xian Yu tomorrow." After Xing Fuliu, Chen Yangzi, and the other cultivators left the altar, they flew all the way out of Sleeping Star Mountain. However, when they arrived at a ravine that was sandwiched between 2 mountains, a barrier of strong clouds appeared in front of them. It was thick and heavy, and they were unable to pass through it. When everyone saw that they were about to leave the mountain, they couldn't help but be shocked and angry. Someone shouted, "Didn't you, Xian Yu, say that you would let us go? Are you going to go back on your words?" Xing Fuliu was also panicking. He was different from the others. He had killed Xian Yu before. Although that person wasn't a disciple of Xian Yu, he might come back for revenge. Xing Fuliu also shouted, "Fellow Taoists, if Xian Yu goes back on his words, we can just go back." At this moment, a rainbow flew out from the sky. It was Xian Yu's summoning elder, Chunyu Ji, who used an escape art to come out. He cupped his hands at the crowd and said, "Fellow Taoists, don't panic. I, Xian Yu, should let you go, but I'm afraid that there are people from Zhongtai among you. If they go out and call for reinforcements, I'm afraid it will be disadvantageous to us. Thus, I ask everyone to stay here for now. After tomorrow's battle, you can leave on your own." Everyone was still dissatisfied. They had an agreement earlier, but now there was this, and they felt like they were being played. Many of them immediately thought of going back. Chunyu Ji continued, "If everyone is interested, you can also come to my Xian Yu. Tomorrow, we will attack Zhongtai together. Those who contribute will be rewarded, but if you are not willing, that's fine too. You can stay here for now. You can't even wait for one night, right?" Xing Fuliu's heart moved, and he stood out from the crowd. He cupped his hands and said, "Emissary Chunyu, if what you said is true, I am willing to be the vanguard." Chunyu Ji glanced at him and smiled. Fellow Taoist Xing is not mediocre. Come, bestow a spirit crane cloak. At this moment, a slender servant girl flew down from the peak. Her soft jade hand held a wooden tray with a white feather cloak on it. Chunyu Ji knew that this was a treasure, so he didn't hesitate and happily accepted it. He shook the cloak open and draped it over his body. Seeing that there were benefits to be gained, everyone was moved. They all expressed their willingness to work for Xian Yu. Chunyu Ji saw that things were going smoothly, and he couldn't help but smile. He took care of the disciples beside him and said, "Take the spell deeds down and let them sign them." The cultivators took the spell deeds and saw that it was almost the same as Zhong Tai's, but the name was changed to Xian Yu's. At this moment, they didn't have any thoughts of resistance. They forced out their essence blood and signed the spell deeds. In just a moment, the cultivators that originally belonged to Zhong Tai's side had turned to Xian Yu's side. Yang Shuyong looked at this scene and said happily, "Spiritual Master Rong's plan is brilliant. I, Xian Yu, will have 10 more helpers without any effort." Rong Juanzhong pointed down a few times and said with a faint smile, "After today's battle, Xian Yu, have already won against Zhong Tai by more than one level. Now that I have the help of these people, when tomorrow comes, I can openly suppress them. If Zhong Tai doesn't comply, under the general situation, I can turn him into dust." Yang Shuyong couldn't stop laughing. Chunyuji was also rueful. Rong Juanzhong grasped the cultivator's thoughts of seeking benefits and avoiding harm. He first split Zhong Tai, then took the chance to gather people over. This method was not bad. Gathering dozens of cultivators tomorrow to suppress them, he knew that if it was him, he probably wouldn't have any thoughts of resistance. At this moment, he suddenly thought of something and asked curiously, "Why don't I see that priest Zhang among those people?" Rong Juanzhong glanced at him and said, "This is not strange. Since he knows that Shen Baishuang and I, Xian Yu, have enmity, why would he walk into the trap? Since he is willing to be buried with Zhong Tai, then we can deal with him together tomorrow." Elder Hui Xian walked out of Sleeping Star Mountain, and Chu Changji was already waiting outside. He came up and said, "Master, disciple has been guarding here, and there is nothing strange." Elder Hui Xian nodded his head. He was a cautious person, and to guard against Xian Yu cult, he didn't do anything outside the mountain. Before entering the mountain, he placed Chu Changji outside to receive him. He said, "Is the matter that I ordered you to do done properly?" Chu Changji hurriedly said, "Disciple has already opened up a cave abode 30 miles away. The terrain is hidden, and if one didn't search intentionally, one wouldn't be able to find it." Elder Hui Xian praised, "Not bad. After this matter, there is no need to hide outside, you can even come back to the cave abode to cultivate." Chu Changji was extremely excited. Elder Hui Xian said that he would be expelled from the sect, and this was not a lie. He also understood that this was because of the important matter, and now that he was willing to be taken back into the sect, there was no need to wander outside anymore. He immediately knelt down and cried, "Disciple thanks Master for your great kindness." Elder Hui Xian nodded his head and said, "Lead the way." Chu Changji hurriedly got up and said, "Master, follow disciple." Both of them flew together, and after a short distance, they arrived at the cave abode that Chu Changji mentioned. This place was located in a sunken part of the mountain wall, and the outside was overgrown with weeds and trees, making it hard for passers-by to notice. Elder Hui Xian took a look and was also satisfied. He entered the inner room and took a glance to confirm that there was no outsider before shaking his sleeve, and a cloud of white smoke came out. When it was piled up to a person's height, it suddenly dispersed, and Luo Dongchuan's figure was revealed. Elder Hui Xian said, "Fellow Taoist Luo, Zhong Tai has been forced into a desperate situation, and we will know tonight whether he succeeds or not." Luo Dongchuan took out a jade token, and after a brief inspection, he said, "There is no talisman message. I think Qiao Huanzhuan has not made up her mind, but it is not urgent. This time when I came out, Elder Ancestor gave me a talisman, and it has the ability to pass through formations and restrictions. When Xian Yu makes his move tomorrow, my aunt will also be inside to help, and we can save Zhong Tai and the rest." Chu Changji was slightly puzzled, and said, "Elder Luo, if Zhong Tai is not willing to join hands with us, wouldn't this be a waste of effort?" Luo Dongchuan chuckled, and said, "If we do this, what do you think the 3 southern sects will think?" Chu Changji thought for a moment, and said, "They will definitely say that Zhong Tai is colluding with the Python tribe." At this point, he suddenly paused, and a strange expression appeared on his face, as if he understood something. Luo Dongchuan laughed, and said, "That's right, ever since the 2 sects fought, the 3 southern sects have the intention to dip their hands into the north, but they still lack an excuse. Since there is no excuse, then I will give them one, and by then, it will be the same, and I am not afraid that Qiao Huanzhuan will not give in. Chu Chengji did not expect to actually use such a method, and after careful consideration, as long as this matter is done, Zhong Tai can be said to be unable to defend himself, and this plan to drag people into the water may seem like a scoundrel, but it is very effective. He also did not know how to evaluate, and could only sigh, and said, extraordinary people use extraordinary methods. Elder Huixian said, since this is the case, I think there is no need for us to be master and disciple tomorrow. I will part ways with fellow Taoist here. But Luo Dongchuan stopped him, and said, there is no need to rush, no matter what, Zhong Tai is our tribe's future ally, and it is not good for his power to be weakened too much. After rescuing him tomorrow, if he is chased by Xian Yu, I will still need fellow Taoists to come out and stop him, and save as many as you can. How could Elder Huixian not know that this was to prevent him from staying out of the matter, but as long as he got what he wanted, the rest were small matters, and said with an indifferent expression, so be it. The night passed quickly. At dawn the next day, Xian Yu sent another disciple out, and when he arrived under the Pushou flying carriage, he bowed and said, Sect Master Qiao, Sect Master Yang sent this disciple to ask if Zhong Tai is willing to admit defeat? As long as Sect Master Qiao and Elder Yan are willing to surrender, Xian Yu will not pursue the matter. Elder Bai saw that Xian Yu did not forget to use psychological tactics even at this moment, and he was annoyed, and snorted coldly, causing the disciple's body to sway, his face pale, and he almost fell down. Elder Yan said in a low voice, Shitty, this person is only a junior to pass on a message, there is no need to make things difficult for him, and don't let others look down on him. Sect Master Qiao said in a low voice, go back and tell Yang Shuyong that the orthodoxy passed down by Grandmaster Jinzhong cannot be given away so easily. If he wants to take my, Qiao Huanzhuan's, head, he can, but it will depend on how many Xian Yu disciples are willing to pay with their lives. That disciple just now suffered a loss, and did not dare to say more, and after a bow, he turned and left. Not long after, he returned to the top of the mountain, and repeated Sect Master Qiao's words without missing a word. Yang Shuyong had long expected this, and with a sneer, he turned back and asked, have the restrictions been set up? Chunyu Ji bowed respectfully and said, everything is in place. All the peaks are guarded by our sect's disciples, and there are no restrictions, so no one can enter or leave. Yang Shuyong raised his hand, and there was a loud noise from the top of the mountain. Behind him, dozens of flying lights flew out at the same time, and the multicolored lights flashed, surged, and shot out green light. From the looks of it, there were more than 100 of them. Many Yuaniing cultivators gathered together, and the heaven and earth were filled with astral winds, Xian Qi filled the air, and the clouds were dazzling. With endless power, they pressed down with the power to split the clouds and overturn the seas. Compared to this, the dozen people on the platform were like a small boat in a big wave, and could capsize at any time. Sect Master Qiao saw that among them were the people who had just left yesterday, and he could not help but be shocked and angry. With a crack, he broke the rui in his hand, and his eyes were bloodshot as he stared at the sky, and he laughed bitterly, good, 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 good. Madame Zhao stood with him in silence. Elder Yan let out a long sigh, and said, Shitty, quickly activate the restrictive formation. He also did not know how long the restrictive formation could last under such heavy pressure, so he could only do his best and leave it to fate. Zhang Yan looked forward, and suddenly smiled. With a wave of his sleeve, a clear light appeared, and in an instant, he was in the sky. When Sect Master Qiao saw this, he said anxiously, Fellow Zhang, what are you doing? Quickly return to the formation. Zhang Yan, however, did not pay any attention to him. His expression was calm, and he faced the surging astral winds and clouds with his hands behind his back, and his sleeves fluttered under the wind. At this moment, the 7 cultivators at the front were already within a mile of him. Seeing that he was alone in front of them, they all sneered, looked at each other, and increased their speed. As long as they were close enough, they could take out their treasures together, and they would be able to easily kill him. However, when they were only 1,000 feet away, they felt their bodies stop abruptly, and they could not move at all. It was as if they were restrained in mid-air by an invisible supernatural power, and they immediately panicked. Someone shouted, "Oh no, it's the heaven and earth seal." Rong Juanzhong had been watching the battle from behind, and one of the 7 people happened to be Xian Yu's disciple. His eyes flashed, and he was about to fly over to help. However, when he was halfway there, he suddenly saw a ray of sword light that was like a rainbow, and it was actually coming at him from thousands of feet away. His heart shuddered. A normal sword light that could travel more than 1,000 feet was already amazing, let alone thousands of feet. Seeing that the sword light was coming at him so quickly, like a shooting star, he let out a low grunt and gathered his supernatural power, casting the 30,000 kilograms divine art. The sword orb flew over quickly, and when it was within 1,000 feet of him, its momentum paused, and it was stopped. Then, the sword orb suddenly shook, and out of nowhere, a ray of sword light actually rushed over to him. He was instantly taken aback, and he hurriedly used the technique to stop it again. However, before he could relax, the sword light actually shot out again, and another ray of sword light shot out. It was still charging towards him, and he had no choice but to use the technique again. That sword light was repeatedly stopped more than 10 times, and it looked like a string of stars in midair. However, no matter how the divine art stopped it, the sword light still continued to split, and it seemed to have no end. The last ray actually broke into the area within 100 feet of him. Seeing that the ray of cold light tore through the atmosphere, and the cold flames that shot out almost reached his eyebrows, Rong Juanzhong's expression changed drastically, and he could no longer maintain his composure. He hurriedly lowered his head, and he only felt a chill on his head. A part of his hair bun had already been cut off, and his hair was loose. This time, he was also extremely shocked, and he did not dare to be arrogant, and he fell back in a sorry state. Chapter 697. With a wave of his sleeves, Zhang Yan killed 7 Yuanying cultivators in a row. Everyone was shocked. The cultivators were originally charging forward, but they suddenly froze. It was as if a surging wave had crashed onto a reef, turning them into powder. Unspecified currency literature bar, Waxba unspecified currency. Especially when they saw Rong Juanzhong being forced back by one sword, their morale was shaken. Dozens of cultivators faced him alone, but none of them dared to step forward. Seeing this, everyone on the flying carriage was speechless. They were in a daze and couldn't believe what was happening in front of them. After a while, Sect Master Qiao suddenly thought of that comment. He pondered for a moment and finally came to his senses. He slapped the railing and said excitedly, "Put yourself in a dead end and you will be reborn. Put yourself in a dead end and you will be reborn. I see, I see. The heavens haven't forsaken my Zhongtai, I've actually received help from a noble." Madame Zhao was also surprised, but there was still some worry in her heart that she couldn't get rid of. She asked, "Can Jinren Zhang block it?" After she said that, she felt her hand tighten. She turned around and saw that it was Sect Master Qiao who was squeezing her hand. She could feel waves of trembling, but she couldn't tell if it was excitement or bewilderment. Her gaze was still fixed in front of her as she muttered, "Definitely, definitely." Rong Juanzhong was forced back by Zhang Yan's sword light. After he returned, his face was very gloomy. Everyone looked at his expression and understood that no one dared to come closer. After he mastered the 30,000 kilograms divine art, he was confident that no sharp weapon could get close to him, so he rarely took out his talisman to protect himself. Just now, when he saw the sword light coming from thousands of feet away, he couldn't help but be careless. He was caught off guard and suffered a huge loss. Even though he wasn't injured, he lost all his face. Yang Shuyong walked over and took a few glances at him. He asked, "Jinren Rong, are you injured?" Rong Juanzhong tried his best to calm down and quickly tied up his hair. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for asking, Sect Master. I'm fine. Just now I was careless and almost got hit by this person's flying sword." As he said that, he cast his gaze forward again. Now that he saw Zhang Yan as his greatest enemy, he didn't want to fight him again before he figured out his opponent's background. At that moment, Zhang Yan's mind moved. The sword pellet flew back. It circled around his body in an extremely agile manner. As the sword light flew, it was sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes swift, sometimes sluggish. It seemed to contain some sort of mysterious rhythm as it flashed and leaped without leaving a trace. It was hard to tell. His gaze swept across the crowd. He said in a clear voice, "Fellow Taoists of Xianyu, if you are willing to retreat, I will not allow you to leave. I will not push myself too far, but if I go one step nearer, I will die. Don't blame I for being merciless." His voice rumbled and echoed throughout the mountains. This was his verbal warning. The matter this time was related to the Dharmakaya spirit medicine he used to cultivate, so he had to help Zhong Tai. If Xianyu was willing to let him go, then what happened to Zhong Tai in the future had nothing to do with him, and he wouldn't interfere. But if Xianyu persisted in his opinion and insisted on annihilating Zhong Tai here, then he could only raise his sword and retreat. With these words, there were indeed a few people who had thoughts of retreating. Most of these people were at the first stage of the cultivation realm. In the face of a spell like the Heaven and Earth Lock, they were completely unable to resist. No matter how one looked at it, they would definitely die if they rushed forward. A Xianyu cultivator saw that the situation wasn't right and immediately shouted, "Everyone, don't forget that you all signed the contract. Aren't you afraid of the oath if you retreat in the face of battle?" With this reminder, everyone couldn't help but be wary, but no one went forward. Just now, they all saw what happened to the 7 people. That Xianyu cultivator said again, "Everyone, don't be afraid of this person. He is just one person. Let's surround him and use our treasures to fight." Everyone instantly understood that they weren't just one person, so why did they have to fight head-on? Without any hesitation, they spread out in all directions. They no longer rushed forward as fiercely as before. Instead, they slowly advanced and flanked from 3 sides. There were even some who flew above and hovered high up in the air, intending to launch a sneak attack from above. Zhang Yan stood still with his hands behind his back. His gaze was deep and there seemed to be a cold glint brewing in it. Feeling the killing intent in his heart, the sword pellet buzzed and jumped out, spitting out rays of sharp light. Elder Bai was overwhelmed with emotions as he watched from below. He said loudly, "How can I let Taoist Zhang fight alone for my Zhongtai's matter?" With that said, he was about to jump forward. However, he felt something tighten on his shoulder. Turning around, he saw Elder Yen pressing him down. He asked anxiously, "Senior, why are you stopping me?" Elder Yen Daoren said, "Junior, don't be anxious. Look at that sword pellet. If I'm not wrong, this Taoist Zhang is a sword cultivator. Such a person can cross the rainbow and pierce through the clouds. He's never afraid of group battles. If you go up, not only will you not be able to help him, you will also become a burden." This, Elder Bai was at a loss. He had also cultivated to the 2nd stage of the Yuanying realm, so when did he become so useless? However, when he thought about how Zhong Tai had relied on an outsider cultivator to save the situation, he felt a wave of dejection in his heart. The cultivators on the field had already surrounded Zhang Yan. Seeing that the time was right, the Xianyu disciple shouted, "Do it," and threw his treasure down. With this person taking the lead, everyone else also made their move. Dozens of treasures fell down, and for a moment, rays of light filled the entire area. Zhang Yan's expression was calm. He took a step forward, and suddenly, he heard the sound of surging waves. It was as if the valley was suddenly flooded. A boundless light of water rose up from under his feet and spiraled around his body. All the treasures that flew over fell into it without a sound and disappeared. The cultivators who attacked immediately discovered that the connection between their treasures and their minds was instantly severed. They were all shocked, but no matter how much they shouted, they couldn't summon it back. At this time, they saw that in the middle of the waves, a fiery red cloud slowly overflowed, followed by a slight rustling sound. In just a short moment, a droning sound resounded, and it was clamorous like needles were pricking it. Everyone was distraught, and when they saw it clearly, they noticed that the red cloud was actually condensed from countless dark red and blood-red venomous worms. Many people saw that it looked fierce and knew that it was not a good thing. They didn't care about collecting their treasures and hurriedly retreated. The bloodline golden insect hadn't come out for a long time. Normally, it only relied on the spiritual energy that Zhang Yan occasionally poured into it to nourish it, so it was already starving. At this moment, when it smelled the flesh and blood of a living person, its jaws and teeth moved. With a caw-caw sound, it scattered and flew all over the sky, gnawing on whoever it saw. There were a few people who couldn't dodge in time. Their protective treasures were bitten through in just a few bites. Even if they summoned their treasures, they could only hold on for a few breaths. In the blink of an eye, a person was gnawed to the point where no flesh or bone was left. Everyone was shocked. They had never seen such fierce and ferocious evil insects before, so they immediately fell into chaos. Zhang Yan saw that his goal of disturbing everyone had been achieved. His eyes flashed. He shook his sleeves and used the sword escape technique. His body and sword became one, turning into a soaring sword light. He brazenly killed his way into the crowd. This time, it set off a reign of terror. The cultivators of the two sects only saw a sword light sweeping across the field. Brilliant neon lights flashed back and forth. Wherever the sword light went, pieces of flesh and blood scattered. The flying sword technique was originally good at fighting against many alone. With the help of the blood thread golden insects, his sword had killed 12 people in just a few moments. In less than a minute of fighting, the number of cultivators who had directly or indirectly died in his hands had already exceeded 20. No one was able to withstand his attacks. The crowd of cultivators was killed until they were panic-stricken and terrified. It was unknown who was the first to shout, but then they turned around and ran. The rest of the people didn't care about the restriction of the contract and fled in panic in all directions. Yang Shuyong was both shocked and furious as he watched everyone flee. They were just about to crush the bell platform and complete the great cause of the two sects becoming one. However, Zhang Yan had interfered midway, single-handedly slaughtering dozens of cultivators of the same generation. He couldn't vent his anger on Rong Juanzhong, so he could only shout at the protector beside him, Mo Shirtong, take this person and capture him. Don't say that you can't defeat him with so many people. If you can't do it, don't come back to see me. Mo Shirtong complained in his heart, but he couldn't refuse the Supreme Headmaster's order. He could only step forward and accept the order. Rong Juanzhong's eyes flashed and he called out to him, Protector Mo, take this treasure. It might have a miraculous effect. Mo Shirtong looked at the 100 refinements locking pillar. Rong Juanzhong took a few steps forward and reminded him, this treasure is strange. It is made of 4-colored gang sand. Only enlightened Master Dong Tian can take it head-on. I think Taoist Zhang's watercolored light is strange, but it may not be able to subdue this treasure. As long as we get close, we will be able to injure him severely. Let's take advantage of this moment when he is full of himself. Mo Shirtong understood and said, Supreme Headmaster, enlightened Master Rong, let's see what I can do. He didn't go too far from the top of the mountain. He was prepared to run back the moment something went wrong. After a few glances, he found an opportunity and threw out 3 flying knives to distract Zhang Yan. Then, a ball of spiritual light wrapped around the 100 refinements lock pillar and hid it behind him. Then, he threw it out as well. Zhang Yan suddenly heard the sound of a sword in his heart, and he was immediately alerted. He glanced around and sneered. With a wave of his sleeves, he used the 5 elements escape technique. The 3 flying daggers and the 100 refinements locking pillar were evaded when they got close to him. Then, he pointed with his finger and a bolt of lightning shot out. Mo Shirtong didn't even have time to escape before he was struck by the divine lightning. With a boom, he exploded into pieces along with his treasures. Zhang Yan rolled up his sleeves again, and the watery light behind him shook. When it disappeared, the 100 refinements locking pillar and the flying daggers were gone. Rong Juanzhong saw all of this, and his expression was solemn. He said in a low voice, this person's Dao techniques and supernatural powers are only at the 2nd stage of Yuanying, but I didn't expect his magical powers to be so strong. If we can't fight him head-on, we can only retreat and defend. Yang Shuyong suddenly turned his head and looked at him with a sharp gaze. With a hint of questioning in his voice, he said, "What? Retreat and defend?" Rong Juanzhong said indifferently, "Headmaster, have you forgotten that we have the protection of the formation? Our sect is already in an invincible position, so why should we risk our lives to fight him? Let's just trap him here and see what else he can do." He wasn't someone who would lose his mind after losing face. At this moment, he was still calm. Although the battle was fierce and half of them were injured or dead, Xian Yu's previous arrangements were very safe. As long as Zhang Yan reached their mountain, he could use the formation to repel him. Yang Shuyong's expression changed a few times. After thinking about it, he felt that Zhang Yan was really too powerful, and he couldn't do anything to him at the moment. He could only say hatefully, "As you wish." The disciple immediately sent out the order. Not long after, clouds rose from the various mountain peaks and activated the formation. They simply guarded the door and didn't come out. Zhang Yan took a few glances and sneered, "Do you think that you can escape just like that?" As soon as the spell was cast, the high cloud above suddenly shook violently. Then, a yellow smoke slowly rose to the top of the sky and gradually condensed into a giant hand that covered the sky. The sky rumbled continuously. The people below stared blankly at the giant yellow smoke hand that almost covered the sky. They didn't know how to react. Zhang Yan waited until his mana was at its peak. Just as he was about to reach his limit, he let out a loud roar and slammed the mountain peak in front of him. Chapter 698. When the mysterious yellow hand slammed down, a loud noise resounded. For a moment, the mountains shook and the earth quaked. Even the few altars on the mountain peak trembled violently. Many of the junior disciples could not stand steadily, and a large number of them uniformly fell down. With just one hit, the entire array was on the verge of collapsing. At this moment, the Xian Yu sect's cultivators just now understood what Zhang Yan was trying to do. Their faces changed. Rong Juanzhong's strategy of defending and retreating wasn't too bad. As long as they had control of the way out of the mountain, they could send some of the disciples to stay here while the rest went to take care of the various sects in the country of Chu. Zhong Tai went all out this time. There was no one to watch the back. It wouldn't be long before Xian Yu sect could unify the two sections. It was a good plan. However, they didn't expect Zhang Yan to be so ferocious. He actually wanted to break the array by force. Yang Shuyong was frightened, he shouted madly, "Guards, guards, quickly protect the formation for me, protect the formation." It was originally set up hastily, and it was only connected by the altar and the restrictive formation. It was fine to deal with ordinary attacks, but it was difficult to resist the enormous hand that shook the heavens. Moreover, even the unusually thick and heavy cloud-like curtain had dispersed quite a bit when the palm descended. Zhang Yan could vaguely see the situation inside the array. There were cultivators flying everywhere. It was a mess. However, after a while, it was covered up again. It was obvious that the cultivators inside were using their mana to maintain the array. He grinned and manipulated the chi in his body. He raised his giant hand again and slammed it down again. This attack was much stronger than the last one. Many of the weaker disciples were hit by the recoil. They spat out blood and fell to the ground. Yang Shuyong's eyebrows were twitching. The restrictive formation was already on the verge of breaking, and now it was like adding snow to snow. If another attack came, no matter how he looked at it, it wouldn't be able to withstand it. He immediately pointed to the sky and ordered, "Men, go up and stop him." Rong Juanzhong felt it was inappropriate. Zhang Yan was protected by the evil bug. If there were too few people, they would be sending themselves to their deaths. Not only would it be useless, it would weaken their forces. Instead, it would weaken their own forces. He immediately dissuaded, "Sect leader, you can't." Displeased, Yang Shu said, "Rongzhenren, just now we'll do as you say." They retreated to the mountain. But it couldn't stop this person at all. "Since you say this method won't work, then give me a feasible plan. Rong Juanzhong's mind raced as he thought of a delaying tactic. He said in a deep voice, I've got it. Time was of the essence, so he didn't have much time to explain. He pulled a cultivator over and whispered a few words to him. The cultivator was taken aback and hesitated. Rong Juanzhong noticed his reluctance and threatened, You are afraid of Priest Zhang, but are you not afraid of me? The cultivator trembled and bowed. Yes, I will go now. When he finished, he bit the bullet and flew out of the forbidden formation. He looked at Zhang Yan's figure in midair and said calmly, Wait, Jinren Zhang. I have something to say. Zhang Yan looked over and realized that he recognized this person. He was Lan Jianguang, who won the first round of the battle. He said, So it's Brother Lan, what can I do for you? Lan Jianguang fearfully glanced at the yellow hand hanging high in the air. He carefully cupped his hands and said, Spiritual Master Zhang, I have to remind Spiritual Master that according to the rules of the battle, this mountain boundary is already the land of my Xianyu. As long as Spiritual Master takes a step in, Zhong Tai will lose and the people in the sect will be at my disposal. Spiritual Master should think carefully. Even if you dismantle the forbidden formation, you can't reverse Zhong Tai's defeat. He was afraid that Zhang Yan couldn't hear him, so he shouted with all his might. Even the cultivators on the Paleo flying carriage could vaguely hear him. Elder Yan couldn't help but frown. This is bad. Xian Yu wants to use the rules of the battle to control Jinren Zhang. Zhang Yan was someone who signed the contract and could be considered a cultivator of Zhong Tai. If he violated the rules set by the two sects masters, it would be considered a violation of the promise. Xian Yu couldn't do anything to him, but Zhong Tai lost. If it was another person, Yang Shuyong and the others would love for the other person to violate the promise. However, the person in front of them was too strong. After breaking the formation, if he focused on killing, they didn't know how many of them could escape. For the lives of the cultivators in their sects, they had to use this as a threat. Sect Master Qiao smiled bitterly. Just now, Jinren Zhang is too ruthless. Everyone present agreed. Zhang Yan alone killed nearly half of Xian Yu's cultivators with his sword. No one dared to come out. He was truly fierce. After Zhang Yan finished listening, he smiled faintly. Are you done? Lan Jianguang couldn't tell what he was thinking. He could only retreat while saying, Yes. Zhang Yan nodded and no longer paid any attention to him. He flicked his sleeves, and the mysterious yellow hand above the sky crashed down. Lan Jianguang turned pale with fright. He turned into a ray of light and fled back into the formation. Rong Juanzhong looked at the incoming palm and knew that his plan couldn't block it. He made a prompt decision. Sect Master, retreat quickly. Yang Shuyong didn't say anything and turned into a ray of light. Seeing that even the Sect Master was escaping, everyone else also rushed to fly away from the mountain top. They didn't go far before they felt the top of their heads turn dark. There was a loud explosion behind them, so loud that their eardrums felt like they were going to burst. Looking back, they saw the rocks collapsing, the trees falling, and the dust and gravel flying everywhere. When the dust settled, everyone realized that a part of the mountain top had been slapped away. The restrictive formation altar on the mountain had been completely shattered. This great power shocked everyone. Rong Juanzhong looked up. He noticed that after Zhang Yan destroyed the restrictive formation, his figure was still in midair. He didn't make any other moves. After pondering for a while, he became spirited and said, Sect Master, just now, those words were useful. Yang Shuyong also realized that although Zhang Yan had destroyed the restrictive formation, he didn't attack. This meant that he had some scruples and didn't dare to cross the line. Just now could only be regarded as him venting his anger. He couldn't help but laugh wildly. What can I do? What can I do? Many disciples laughed along with him. However, if they looked closely, they could see a trace of fear hidden in their eyes. The reason for their exaggerated actions was just now's release of emotions after escaping death. Rong Juanzhong was not as optimistic as Yang Shuyong in the face of such a formidable enemy. He could not afford to be careless at all. He found a few cultivators who were on good terms with him and said, "It's enough to have me and the sect master here. Quickly send people over and try to invade the various celestial cities in Zhongtai. Remember not to use my Xian Yu's men to prevent others from gossiping. Also, don't touch Hope Voice Mountain." During the battle, he made use of cultivators from outside the sect to plot against the opponent's immortal city. I will do the same. Therefore, when the two sides set the rules, both of them tacitly avoided talking about it. As for Hope Voice Mountain, it was the most important place in Zhongtai. There were people from the heavenly abode overseeing it. Xian Yu didn't dare to provoke him. Zhang Yan slowly swept his gaze over. Xian Yu's 100 disciples and 20 Yuanying cultivators had retreated to the back of the mountain. Do you think that if I don't step into your mountain world, I won't be able to restrain you? He narrowed his eyes. He might as well focus and adjust his breathing here, and use his spiritual opportunity. Seeing him standing in the clouds, not retreating nor coming up, a thought appeared in Chunyuji's mind and he blurted out, could it be that his mana is running out? He turned his head and said, Sect Master, why don't we take this chance, oh? Yang Shuyong took a few glances and felt that it was the case. But he still couldn't make up his mind, so he looked back at Rong Juanzhong and asked, Jinren Rong, what do you think? Rong Juanzhong focused his gaze and was also suspicious. Zhang Yan was after all a stage 2 Yuanying cultivator. Although he showed off his prowess just now, he must have used up quite a lot of mana. What Chunyuji said was not impossible, but could it be that he was luring the enemy? He suppressed his thoughts and said, Sect Master, we are here today for the important matter of the two sects merging into one. As long as we don't leave the mountain, Zhongtai is destined to lose. There's no need to take the risk. Although Yang Shuyong was tempted, he could only give up on the idea when he heard what he said made sense. Zhang Yan paused in midair for a moment. Then, he opened his eyes and there seemed to be lightning flashing in his eyes. He made a hand sign and once again, the golden hand was formed. This time, it was many times more magnificent than the last time. Everything within 10 miles was yellow, even the light from the sky was covered. Zhang Yan floated in midair, his feet stepping on the high cloud. His sleeves fluttered in the wind. He looked down, looking at the mountains and rivers. After a while, he raised his hand and pointed down. The golden hand in the sky was controlled by him. With a rumbling sound, it slowly pressed down. Yang Shuyong felt something was wrong and asked angrily, what is he doing? Rong Juanzhong seemed to feel something. He pondered for a while and was shocked. He thought to himself, could it be? He suddenly raised his head and looked forward. At that moment, he saw the golden hand falling. This time, it did not hit the mountain. Instead, it closed its fingers and wrapped around the mountain, grabbing it. There was a rumbling sound and rocks kept rolling down the slope. The mountain started to shake and loosen. It was trying to uproot the mountain. Everyone was stunned. Rong Juanzhong shouted, oh no! He jumped up and rushed to the front. He gritted his teeth and said, how can I let you move it? When the two sects set the rules, the mountain was the boundary. If the mountain was moved, how could it stop this person? He shouted out loudly as he circulated the spirit energy in his entire body to circulate the 30,000 kilogram divine ability to the limit. His spirit energy suffused out and instantly enveloped the entire mountain, desperately holding it in place and preventing it from being moved away by Zhang Yan. Normally, his magic power could only freeze things within 100 feet of him. Fortunately, even though this hill was huge, it was not something created by the celestial sect of wonders. That was why he could do this. Even so, he had used all his strength and his face was slightly distorted. One moved the mountain while the other stabilized the mountain. Mana vibrated between heaven and earth. Spiritual chi gales flowed like tides, and the rumbling sound was endless. For a moment, the two of them fell into a battle of mana. Such a shocking scene caused everyone to be dumbfounded. Especially the disciples of the two sects, their expressions were even more lifeless. Moving mountains and uprooting mountains and rivers. Such methods of battle had already far exceeded their imagination. Zhang Yan had expected Rong Juanzhong to stop him. However, he did not stop there. He laughed in the air and said, "How can such a small technique stop me?" He suddenly shouted loudly, his voice was like a clap of thunder. He suddenly activated his mana, and with a rumble, the place where the two of them were fighting was empty. The entire mountain peak had actually been forcefully escaped by him using the 5 elements escape technique. P.S. Chapter 699. Rong Juanzhong's mana was originally wrapped around the mountain, but the mountain suddenly disappeared in front of him. It was as if all the energy in his body landed on empty air. It was extremely uncomfortable, and he couldn't help but let out a muffled groan as a trickle of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. At this instant, he instantly knew that he'd revealed a flaw. He'd suffered a loss at Zhang Yan's hands earlier, so at this moment, he'd already become extremely vigilant in his heart. He didn't even raise his head before raising his hand and withdrawing a magnificent treasure tree that emitted a multicolored glow. It had jade branches, jade leaves, golden flowers, and silver fruits, and it glowed with a bright light. It emanated a 30 long aura of treasures that protected his body within it. Just as he finished this action, a fierce sword light came out of nowhere and suddenly arrived. With a clang, it slashed on the treasure tree. The branch of the treasure tree swayed and trembled, but in the end, it didn't break. Although he was prepared, Rong Juanzhong broke out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, he reacted in time. If he was one step slower, he would have died under the sword. Looking at the empty space in front of him, he was shocked and knew that things were not good. The mountain was moved elsewhere, and the barrier that blocked Zhong Tai was no longer useful. At this moment, his choice was to fight to the death, or retreat to the back of the mountain and find a countermeasure. He thought quickly and felt that he wasn't prepared enough, so it wasn't a good time to fight with Zhang Yan. Thus, he decisively took out a movement talisman and used his mana. A shining spiritual light wrapped around his body, and like a meteor, he flew back to the mountain behind him. Zhang Yan saw that he was hiding in the formation again, and the mountain road in front of him was cleared. He didn't chase after him, so he thought for a moment and waved his sleeve, returning to the Pusho flying carriage. When he got on the carriage, sect leader Qiao led the cultivators to greet him. At this moment, when they faced Zhang Yan, they didn't dare to look at him in the same way as before. All of them were terrified by the divine abilities he revealed. Sect leader Qiao carefully flattered him and invited him to take a seat before sitting down himself. Then, he cautiously asked, "Spiritual Master Zhang, what should Zhong Tai do now?" Zhang Yan smiled, "This is a matter between your sect and Xianyu. If sect leader Qiao wants to return to Zhong Tai, I will protect you." Sect leader Qiao hesitated for a moment. To be honest, after he saw Zhang Yanqin's ability, he really wanted to rely on his ability to completely destroy Xianyu. However, Zhong Tai was still in a precarious situation just now. If he wanted to get rid of his opponent now, it would be too much. It was really hard for him to say anything. Elder Yan knew that he was in a difficult position. He came forward and bowed deeply to Zhang Yan, saying, "This Yan has been rude. Dare I ask, is Reverend willing to help me defeat Xianyu?" Elder Yan knew he was in a difficult position, so he came up and bowed deeply of Zhong Tai. "Master of Zhong Tai, he said. "Master, he said. Zhong of Master, Zhong of Yan, Juanhe. Tai of Master of Zhong of Tai." The meaning behind his words was that he didn't mind continuing to be Zhong Tai's sharp sword, but this time he came with a plan, so he couldn't do it for free. Sect leader Qiao and his wife were pleasantly surprised when they heard that. Since this person had a request, then it was easy to deal with. Zhong Tai's thousands of years of accumulation would definitely satisfy him. He immediately stood up and said seriously, "As long as Jinren Zhang can help my Zhong Tai defeat Xianyu, all the things that you need will be given with all the strength of the sect." Zhang Yan glanced at him. Sect leader Qiao obviously wanted to tie him and Zhong Tai together, but this did not conflict with his goal. In order to cultivate the Dharmakaya of Yuanjin, he needed quite a number of the 3 types of spiritual medicine. If he were to rely on his own strength to collect them, he would only barely be able to maintain it. Sometimes, because he was not familiar with the internal affairs of Dongsheng, his hands and feet were tied. With the help of Zhong Tai, a sect that was entrenched in this continent, it was obviously more suitable than him. He nodded and said, "If that's the case, then I will agree to it." Outside Sleeping Star Mountain, Luo Dongchuan paced back and forth, puzzled. Why hasn't Aunt sent the letter yet? Could it be that something has happened? In his opinion, with Xian Yu's strength, Xian Yu should have already forced Zhong Tai into a hopeless situation. However, he still hadn't received any message from Xian Yu, so he couldn't help but feel slightly anxious. Unfortunately, the inside and outside of the mountain were sealed by the Prohibition Formation, so he had no way to investigate. He was not worried about the safety of that ant, but he was afraid that Zhong Tai would be destroyed by Xian Yu, causing the Python Division's plan to fail. Hui Xian Elder was not anxious and said in a deep voice, "Since it is your sect's talisman, no matter what Xiao Huanzhuan is planning, it will be able to wrap her up." Why does brother need to be anxious? Luo Dongchuan grinned and said, "Maybe it is not the right time yet." "Alright, let's wait a little longer." Hui Xian Elder looked at Sleeping Star Mountain that was 30 miles away. He did not know why, but he felt that he had overlooked something. But he could not figure out what the problem was. He shook his head and said, "Maybe I am thinking too much." After Rong Juanzhong returned to the mountain, he went straight to the altar and sat down to think about the various methods that Zhang Yan used in the fight just now. After a while, he already had a countermeasure and thought, "Just now I do not know your methods, but it is not necessarily that I am inferior to you. Let's fight again and see who is the winner." After making up his mind, he went to see Yang Shuyong. However, when he arrived at the sect leader's altar, he saw Yang Shuyong sitting on a rock, gnashing his teeth in anger. He didn't know what he was cursing. Rong Juanzhong sighed and said, "I did not expect that priest Zhang to have the ability to move the mountains and overturn the seas. This fight is going to fail on the verge of success. No wonder sect leader is like this." He took a few steps forward and cupped his hands together. "Sect leader, I have a request. Can I borrow the 3 mountain chi suppressing tablet?" Yang Shuyong came back to his senses. He frowned and asked, "Jinren Rong, what do you want this thing for?" Although the 3 mountain chi suppressing tablet was a magical treasure that could change the weather and bring favorable weather, it could only be used by mortals. To cultivators of Xian, it was of little value. He had never taken it to heart. Usually, when a few of his confidants came to borrow it for fun, he did not think much of it. But at this moment, Rong Juanzhong suddenly asked for it, which made him feel a little strange. This matter was originally a secret, and Rong Juanzhong did not want to say it. But he was forced into this situation by Zhang Yan. If he did not think of a way to save the situation, Xian Yu would inevitably be defeated. Surnamed Suo said frankly, "If my sect's 3 sounds 3 sky thunder has the help of this item, it can be used in the wind and rain, and its power can be increased by 30%. In this way, I have the confidence to fight that priest Zhang." Yang Shuyong was shocked when he heard this. He immediately stood up and stared at him. He said coldly, "Why have I not heard you mention this before? A magical treasure can increase the power of thunder." Even he, as the headmaster, did not know about this matter. If he knew this item was so important, why would he give it to his child to play with? Rong Juanzhong said sincerely, "Headmaster, it is not that I do not want to say it, but Jinren he has taken care of it." As for the reason, Jinren did not say it clearly. When Yang Shuyong heard that it was Jinren Dongtian's arrangement, his expression became slightly better. And now was not the time to pursue the matter, so he thought for a while and said, "Okay, I will get it for you now." He immediately called for someone and ordered him to go get it. Not long after, that person came back, but his hands were empty. Yang Shuyong said angrily, "Where is the magical treasure?" That person lowered his head and said, I went to ask for it, but Miss Yang was unwilling, so, before he finished speaking, Yang Shuyong knew that his daughter was being petty again. He stomped his feet and had to go get it himself. Not long after, he turned back with a dark face and handed the 3 mountain cheese suppressing tablet to Rong Juanzhong. He said in a deep voice, "Jinren Rong, you are the mainstay of Xianyu. This battle cannot be lost. Do you understand?" Rong Juanzhong was on guard and nodded seriously. Yang Shuyong looked at the sky and said, "It is getting late. Jinren, do you want to meditate and fight tomorrow?" Rong Juanzhong disagreed and said, "There is no need. Zhang Daoist has continuously used his supernatural powers and techniques, so he must be more tired than me. We can go and challenge him. If we miss today, when his mana recovers, it will be even more difficult to deal with him." Yang Shuyong saw that what he said made sense, so he did not stop him and raised his hands to salute him. Rong Jun bowed deeply and looked at his disciples a few more times. Then, he leaped up and turned into a ray of light that flew away. When he reached the clouds, he shouted towards the stage, "Jinren Zhang, just now I hastily accepted the challenge and allowed you to take advantage of me. Now that I think about it, I'm not convinced. I wonder if Jinren dares to fight again." Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. He had originally wanted to fight Xianyu, but Rong Juanzhong's request was exactly what he wanted. Unlike what Rong Juanzhong thought, although he had used his supernatural powers a few times, he had a first-grade golden core after all. His foundation was there, and his mana had not been depleted much. Elder Bai said cautiously, "Just now, Rong Juanzhong retreated in panic when facing Priest Zhang, but now he dares to challenge me. Is there some trick up his sleeve?" Zhang Yan smiled. Ever since he came to Dongsheng, he had not met an opponent who could fight him. Just now watching the battle, he could feel that Rong Juanzhong was still holding back. If he really had some powerful tricks up his sleeve, he would not hesitate to take a look. He stood up from his seat and said loudly, "Since Jinren Rong wants to determine a winner, I will accompany you to the end." As soon as he finished speaking, a cloud appeared under his feet and lifted his body. He floated up and stood not far away from Rong Juanzhong. All the cultivators below stared at the battle intently. The fate of the two sects would be decided by this battle. Rong Juanzhong did not say much. He bowed to the front and took out the treasure tree. He did not move forward, but quickly retreated. When he was more than 10 li away, he held the jade tablet with both hands and rubbed it back and forth. Immediately, a pillar of spiritual light shot into the sky. It shook again and in a split second, the weather changed. Fog filled the air and heavy clouds pressed down from the sky. Not long after, the area within a radius of more than 10 miles was covered in fog. Even his figure was completely hidden. Just now, Rong Juanzhong had not told Yang Shuyong about one thing. After reaching the 3rd grade, this treasure would be of great help to the sect's Xian technique, the 3 Guanghui essentials. However, those who had reached this stage before were all under an oath, so they kept their mouths shut. Especially the Trinote Tri-Sky Lightning of the sect. After he obtained the assistance of this treasure, the two of them could be combined to attain a shapeless state, and its might was practically not inferior to the divine ability passed down by founding ancestor Dami. Only by relying on this did he have the confidence to fight Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan originally wanted to use the purple cloud thunder to defeat the enemy. However, he remembered that the treasure tree in Rong Juanzhong's hand was not an ordinary item. If he could not find its source, he might not be able to use it. However, he had many tricks up his sleeves. Even if he did not use this method, he still had ways to deal with Rong Juanzhong. He smiled and said, "Brother Rong, are you trying to bully I because I do not know this? Then let's give it a try. Let's see whose Dao technique is better." As soon as he finished speaking, he shouted and raised his hand to form a spell. Immediately, clouds of thick fog surged out from his body. The sound of muffled thunder came from inside the fog, like the beating of a drum. There were also flashes of lightning. The sound was shocking. Then, it rolled and spread out. In just a moment, it covered the entire mountain. Chapter 700. Zhang Yan and Rong Juanzhong both created thick clouds and fog. Heaven and earth were filled with turbid air, as if they had entered the netherworld. The sky was dark and gloomy. The cultivators from the two sects could not see anything except for a vast expanse of whiteness. High-quality update. Rong Juanzhong had the help of the 3-mountain chi-suppressing tablet. It was as if he had sunk into warm water. Not only did he recover his energy, but he also felt that he could control his mana freely. As long as he had this treasure in hand, he would not be afraid of his peers. Although he was confident, he did not dare to be careless in view of his opponent's strength. Looking around, there was haze everywhere, making it difficult to identify. He could not see Zhang Yan's figure, but he was not in a hurry. With the change of the weather, his opponent would not be able to find him. Moreover, he had the ability to seal the heaven and earth. Under the cover of his mana, as long as anyone was within 5 miles of him, he would be able to know where they were. Just now, Zhang Yan's sword had left a deep impression on him. With the cover of the fog, it could be said that his opponent's advantage was greatly limited. He thought to himself, with the help of the treasure from my sect, my mana did not decrease, but increased. On the other hand, you will be exhausted after a long battle. As long as I can drag the battle and slowly fight with you, I don't believe that I can't defeat you. He observed Zhang Yan's techniques and found that they were all extremely powerful and difficult to break. If he were to fight them head-on, he would not be able to shake them. Therefore, he came up with this plan to find a way to wear down his opponent. At this moment, the waves of clouds that rumbled ceaselessly surged over, and there were countless lightning snakes swimming about within them. They crackled and flickered as they swiftly shot over. Immediately, over 10 golden lights struck the treasured light, causing it to tremble and flicker. Rong Juanzhong held his breath and did not move. He was knowledgeable and could see that this Dao technique had a wide range and there was no way to avoid it. Moreover, he was in a hurry and was not good at escaping. Therefore, he relied on the protection of the treasure tree and stood still, so that his opponent would not be able to detect his location. This spell was extremely powerful, and he firmly believed that it was impossible for Zhang Yan to use it endlessly. Once he was exhausted, he would be able to counterattack. Zhang Yan's billowing cloud technique was capable of producing bolts of lightning, and even though it was more than enough to deal with ordinary cultivators, he was clearly aware that it wasn't enough to deal with this third-level Yuaniing cultivator. High-quality updates using this technique was firstly to confuse the other party's eyes and ears and conceal himself. Secondly, it was also to oppose the other party. Thirdly, it was to find the other party's hiding place. After a while, seeing that there was no movement in the fog for a long time, he changed his mind. Since this person didn't want to show himself, he could only force him out. He waved his sleeve, and the blood-thread gold insects beside him rushed forward, scurrying in all directions. These insects could smell the blood, flesh, and spiritual qi of a living person. They could be used to search for Rong Juanzhong. After a while, Rong Juanzhong saw many of the blood-thread gold insects flying not far from him. He could not help but sneer. Just now, seeing the power of these insects, he still had a lingering fear. Now that he had taken the initiative to fight with Zhang Yan, how could he not be prepared for this move? He took out half a scoop of a gourd from his sleeve and a jade pot made of mutton fat. He poured half of the wine into the pot, and a fragrant aroma filled the air. He chanted a spell and shook the 3 mountains chi-suppressing tablet. The mellow wine flew into the clouds, and then turned into a heavy rain that fell. The blood-thread gold insects acted on instinct. They felt that the rain was full of spiritual qi, and they greedily sucked it in. After a while, as if they were drunk, they first spun on the spot, and then fell one after another. Zhang Yan immediately noticed this change, and he smiled nonchalantly. If this method did not work, he could just change to another method. He lifted his body and flew to the sky. He waved his sleeve, and in an instant, the golden hand was formed again. It grew to a size of 20 miles, and almost covered the entire valley. He pointed downwards, and with a strong wind, it went straight into the depths of the mist. Rong Juanzhong immediately noticed the movement above him. Now that his mana had increased, he was naturally not afraid. He steadily stood up and took out the three-fingered fork. He used the three transformations of mountain, cloud, and earthquake at the same time, and turned it into a three-fingered giant hand that was made of clouds and smoke. He did not show any weakness, and faced the attack head-on. With a loud bang, the two giant hands of mana collided, and there was an earth-shattering sound. At the place where the two collided, there were circles of ripples. Being hit by the torrent, the clouds in the sky surged like the sea, and it looked like it was boiling. It lasted for a long time. The high-quality update was just around the corner. Under Zhang Yan's probing, he found out that Rong Juanzhong was still hiding in the mist, and did not hide in the mountains on either side. If that was the case, then he could launch a follow-up attack. Now that his mana was not the same as before, under the attack of the Golden Hand, there was no sign of damage. He used his mana, and changed from a slap to a claw, and the 5 fingers suddenly closed. Rong Juanzhong frowned. Even with the protection of the precious tree, he did not dare to take such an attack head-on. He could only take out the three-fingered fork again, and use the earthquake incantation. He drove the force to one point, and chiseled the giant hand. After a dozen consecutive attacks, he saw that the yellow smoke was gradually thinning. Then, the treasure fork turned into the size of a mountain, and fiercely slammed into it. With a loud bang, it finally shattered the giant hand, as if it had broken through a city gate. Zhang Yan smiled. After a series of probing, he roughly determined the opponent's position. He shouted, and his body turned into a ray of light, and flew in that direction. As soon as he was near, Rong Juanzhong sensed him, and his expression froze. If Rong Juanzhong found him, then the previous arrangements would be useless. Therefore, he immediately used his mana, and used the heaven and earth locking technique. Although he knew that he might not be able to do anything to Rong Juanzhong, as long as he could restrain him for a while, he could increase the distance between them, and hide again. Zhang Yan suddenly felt his body sink, and he suddenly smiled, and used the 5 elements escape technique. This supernatural power was the #1 escape technique in Qinsang school. Those who practiced it were not afraid of being trapped. However, if it was someone else who did not have enough qi of the 5 elements, it would be useless. But Rong Juanzhong was different. With the 5 elements Tai Xian technique as the foundation, he could use it purely with mana. Now that he used it, there was a miraculous effect, and in an instant, there was no restraint. After breaking this technique, he rushed another 1,000 feet, but still did not see Rong Juanzhong's shadow. Fearing that he would escape, a sword ray flew out, and in an instant, it turned into 32 light wheels. Then, like an arrow, it flew out, and scattered in all directions. The cultivators of Xianyu sect were not good at escape techniques. Even if Rong Juanzhong fought with his Yuanying body, he could not be faster than Rong Juanzhong's sword escape technique. If there was no other way to deal with it, once Rong Juanzhong's sword ray wrapped around him, he would not be able to escape. These changes were extremely fast. Rong Juanzhong did not expect that the confinement technique would not be able to stop Zhang Yan. While he was stunned, a sword ray had already flown over, and with a clang, it hit the treasure ray. Not good. Rong Juanzhong knew that the opponent in front of him was not like others. When he fought, he was decisive and fierce, and he was very experienced. Once he was in front of him, he would not give him a chance to pull away. Should he leave or stay? No, they had only fought for a short while, and Zhang Yan's mana had not been depleted much. It was far from the point of a life-and-death battle. If he left, he could only use the 3-sound 3-sky thunder to attack him head-on and stall him. Only then would he be able to leave. However, he had originally planned to use this technique at a critical moment, but once he used it now, his opponent would be able to see through this technique in advance. During a fight, the situation could change in an instant, and there was no room for hesitation. He changed his mind and made a decision. His original strategy would not change, and he would avoid the sharp edge for the time being. He would look for an opportunity later. He shouted softly and waved his hand. Suddenly, there was a burst of thunder, as if there were countless lightning strikes from all directions. However, he could only hear the sound, and he could not see the shape. He did not know where it came from, and he did not know where it came from. There was not even the slightest fluctuation of spiritual vigor. The sound was getting louder and louder, as if thousands of thunder had burst forth. In a short while, the heaven and earth shook. At the same time, he pinched a spell, and the Yuanying body turned into a ray of light, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. When Zhang Yan heard the thunder, he felt the sword pill in between his brows trembling, and the sound was endless. A ray of light flashed in his eyes, and the earth-splitting Qiankuan leaf flew out from the high cloud. A ray of golden light shone down, and it covered him. In a short while, the rumbling sound was heard around him, and it was endless. However, it could not break through the thin layer of golden light curtain. He looked around, and the sword gleams flew around, interweaving into a net. However, there was no trace of Rong Juanzhong, and it was obvious that he had left the place. He thought to himself, this thunder technique is much more powerful than what I saw just now. It must be a hidden trick. Rong Juanzhong placed him here, but he did not follow up with a backup plan. He must be trying to stop me. It seems like he is not in a hurry to win, but he is taking advantage of the favorable time and place to slowly deal with me. He almost immediately guessed what Rong Juanzhong was thinking. If a Yuanying third-grade cultivator were to put down his pride and fight with all his heart, it would be difficult to kill him. However, it was not impossible to break through. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered slightly. He waved his hand and actually put away the heaven and earth leaf. He didn't summon the protective light around his body. Instead, he allowed the lightning to strike him. His body only shook a few times before he stood firm again. He had already cultivated to the 4th grade of the spirit contract, and his body was strong and solid. Moreover, he had 2 layers of protective clothing on him, so he was still standing after being hit by the thunder. He judged that the thunder technique should be done by Rong Juanzhong casually. If it was a full-force attack, it would be more powerful, but it would not be easy to hurt him. Both of them fought for a round, and it seemed like they were evenly matched. However, he was able to peek into the details of his opponent's thunder technique, and he actually had the advantage. He pondered for a while, then took out a few talismans from his sleeves. He flicked his fingers, and the talismans turned into streams of light that dispersed in all directions. After doing all this, he raised his head and looked into the depths of the mist. He squinted his eyes and said, "Let's see where you can hide this time." After Rong Juanzhong retreated far away, he did not see Zhang Yan coming to find him again. He was a little suspicious, but after thinking about it again, he had a thought. Could it be that his mana is already exhausted? He then shook his head. This opponent was not that simple. He would rather be more careful than be rash. However, to know whether it was true, he could test it a few times first. After confirming it, he would then make his move. He fumbled in his sleeve for a while and took out a talisman. He slapped it on his palm, and a cloud of filthy air emerged from it. It rose to the sky and turned into 4 skinny red-eyed monsters with huge hands and feet and long horns on their heads. Their bodies gradually turned from illusory to corporeal. This item was the treasure of the Fu Yang sect in the past. Each of the monsters was refined from the primordial spirit of a Yuanying cultivator. Each of them was extremely strong, and they loved to eat the brains of cultivators. They were extremely vicious. Because it was an item of the evil sect, as a cultivator of Xianyu, it was not appropriate for him to use it openly. The reason why he created the mist earlier was also to hide it. Not long after, the 4 monsters had solidified. Their eyes slowly revealed a fierce glint, and they emitted a ferocious aura. Rong Juanzhong was also shocked. He did not dare to keep the item by his side. He used a spell to control the 4 monsters, and they disappeared without a trace. Chapter 701. After the 4 demons turned into evil spirits, they lost their humanity and only had the thought of finding food to satisfy their hunger. Following a thread of inspiration, they rushed towards where Zhang Yan was hiding. In just a few miles, they arrived in a flash. The monsters didn't conceal their presence at all. As soon as they got close, Zhang Yan sensed them. He focused his gaze and saw 4 ferocious-looking things that looked like humans but weren't, like ghosts but weren't. They leaped over and surrounded him. Even though he was surrounded by 4 monsters, he still looked calm and composed. He had fought with the disciples of the demon doctrine in Donghua continent many times. With one look, he knew that these were demons that were refined with evil methods. Although the demons surrounded him, they seemed to be afraid of something and hesitated to move forward. They bent down and circled around him. After a while, none of them dared to come forward. One of them was especially fierce. It wanted to pounce a few times, but after a few screams, it retreated. The stalemate continued for a while. The devils seemed to be extremely afraid of him. They crouched down and wanted to retreat. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Since you are in front of me, how can I let you leave?" There was a loud sound like the collapse of a dam. It was as if a flood of light surged out from his back and rushed forward. The 4 demons were extremely fast. When they sensed that something was wrong, they immediately turned into red mist and escaped. However, when they were halfway, 4 sword gleams chased after them and slashed at their bodies. Each of them was torn into 2 at the same time. However, they did not stop. The sword gleams split up and each of them produced a dozen streaks of cold lightning. They slashed back and forth, making it impossible for the demons to reform their bodies. At this moment, the water element true light surged over and with a rumble, all of them were sucked in. Zhang Yan's expression was calm as if he had done something unimportant. Although these monsters looked powerful and difficult to kill with ordinary methods, they posed no threat to him. He didn't know how to fight with others, and he didn't have any sharp weapons or magic treasures, so he could easily deal with them. He took out several pieces of talisman paper from his sleeve and tossed them out. He raised his finger and pointed at them a few times before they turned into light and flew away. There was nothing special about these talismans. They could not find Rong Juanzhong directly. However, as long as they sensed spiritual opportunity, they would send out a warning. If he was fighting with many opponents at the same time, these talismans would be useless. However, since there was only Rong Juanzhong, it was effective. Rong Juanzhong did not retreat far and was still 5 miles away. He kept an eye on Zhang Yan's movements. He was not afraid of being discovered because of the thick mist. If Rong Juanzhong chased after him, he would be able to escape in time. Now that the demon was dead, the talismans in his hands suddenly turned to dust. The fear in his eyes grew. He thought, this person's spell is really powerful. For a period of time, he was very careful. He flew back and forth and did not fight with Zhang Yan directly. From time to time, he would release a few spiritual cranes. Based on Zhang Yan's previous supernatural powers, he knew that a few spiritual cranes would not be able to harm him. At most, they would only cause him some trouble. Therefore, this was to put pressure on him from time to time. He wanted to wear down his spirit so that he could not relax and did not have the time to adjust his breathing. Zhang Yan was not in a hurry. He patiently dealt with the trouble his opponent threw in front of him. Not only that, he left a stack of talismans wherever he went. After Rong Juanzhong had been in the fog for a long time, he inadvertently caught a glimpse of a few talismans flying around. His pupils involuntarily shrank. His thoughts turned quickly and he immediately guessed the purpose of these talismans. He quickly released a few spiritual monkeys and they jumped around in all directions to confuse the eyes and ears of the people around him. Zhang Yan's heart skipped a beat. Suddenly, he felt that the talismans were acting strangely. Without any hesitation, he summoned his sword and flew towards the talismans. When he arrived, he saw that it was only a spiritual monkey. It was baring its teeth at him. He sneered and raised his sword to cut off the monkey's head. At this moment, there were a few other places that sensed something. He went to investigate one by one. In less than a minute, he had killed all the spiritual monkeys. Rong Juanzhong came down and used pearls and jades that were full of spiritual vigor to disturb them. However, they were all broken by Zhang Yan. After a few times, he did not have many tricks left. No matter where he went, he would be detected by the talismans. He had no choice but to retreat to the edge of the mountain boundary. There was a reason why he chose that place to fight. His aim was to exhaust Zhang Yan's mana. After a few rounds, if he felt that the time was not right, he could retreat into the mountain behind him to hide. If Zhang Yan chased after him, he would definitely destroy the mountain, and then he would have a chance to catch his breath. This battle involved the life and death of the two sects. It was not a matter for him alone. Naturally, he had to use all the means at his disposal. He had to make full use of all the advantages he had previously. After a while, he arrived at the edge of the mountain. He hesitated for a while and took out a jade pill. It was crystal clear and looked like glass. Inside it, a drop of blood could be faintly seen floating around. He looked at the item reluctantly. Finally, he sighed and held it in his palm. He blew a few breaths and it turned into a stag. It raised its head and raised its horns. It was handsome and had a strong body with 4 strong hooves. This stag was a gift from Shaozang Jing on his 500th birthday. It had always been a treasure. It was originally a strange beast in the North Underworld continent. Its size could be changed at will. It could fight with Yuanying cultivators. It had a pair of sharp horns on its head that could pierce through gold and stone. It could tear apart pythons and dragons. Now that it was released, it was prepared to hide at the side and help. Rong Juanzhong patted his back and whispered into the stag's ear, "Go hide at the side. Come out when I call for you." The stag looked at him and let out a cry. It leaped into the clouds and disappeared in an instant. Not long after, the clouds in front of him parted and a sword gleam flew over. It made a turn in the air and headed towards him. Rong Juanzhong knew the sharpness of the sword gleam. He did not dare to face it head-on. He activated his mana and activated the tree above him. The tree opened up like an umbrella. The tree shone brightly and blocked the sword gleam. He calmed his mind and followed the sword gleam outside. The sword gleam was like a heavy rain, but he did not move. This tree was also a protective weapon of the Xianyu school. It was called the Emerald Tree. It was once used by the master Dong Tian, He Zhuxiang. Unless it was a treasure, it would be very difficult to break. Even if it encountered the 6 famous swords of the Fengxiang Sword School, it would not be able to do anything to it. In just a few breaths, dozens of sword gleams flew over from afar. When they got close, they did not descend. Instead, they made a turn in the air and suddenly merged together. A handsome young Taoist with fluttering sleeves stepped out from the sword gleams. His eyes were like lightning as he looked over and said with a faint smile, "Fellow Taoist Rong, are you not going to leave?" Rong Juanzhong did not show any weakness. He waved his hand and the 3-fingered fork flew up and blocked another sword gleam. He pointed at his feet and said, "I have been waiting for you for a long time. Fellow Taoist, come and take a look. Do you like this place to be your burial ground?" Zhang Yan smiled and did not argue with him. He looked behind Rong Juanzhong and saw that it was close to the valley. He understood Rong Juanzhong's intention. He raised his eyebrows. If he let Rong Juanzhong go this time, he did not know how long it would take to take him down. It would be a long battle. Although he was not afraid of it, he could not let Rong Juanzhong do whatever he wanted since he knew about it. After thinking for a while, he came up with a countermeasure. He raised his hand and flicked his finger. A deep purple lightning shot out from 200 to 300 feet away and hit the precious tree of auspicious light. It was like a hammer hitting the golden shield. In an instant, there were countless sparks and light that exploded. Rong Juanzhong's body could not help but tremble when he took the hit. Zhang Yan was not going to let him go and sent dozens of lightning bolts at him. Under this series of lightning strikes, Rong Juanzhong seemed to be affected and could not stand steadily. The precious tree of auspicious light was also faintly collapsing. He was shocked and knew that he could not just stand and watch. He pointed to the sky and raised the three-fingered fork high up in the sky. He stabbed it towards Zhang Yan from afar. Zhang Yan looked up and met his gaze. A clear light flew out from his mid-brows and attached to the three-fingered fork. Rong Juanzhong saw that although the clear light was not eye-catching, he was very sensitive and noticed that something was wrong. He controlled the three-fingered fork and dodged to the side. As expected, the clear light turned and approached him again. He sneered and kept the three-fingered fork back. After a few breaths, both of them were within 1,000 feet. Rong Juanzhong saw this and shouted. He grabbed with his 5 fingers and used the 1,000 kilograms divine power to stop the clear light in midair. At the same time, he took the spiritual vigor and used the heaven and earth lock technique to suppress Zhang Yan. He then used his mind and the three-fingered fork vibrated in the air. It turned into a smoke arrow and pierced through the clouds. Even so, he did not stop. He flicked his left sleeve and activated the 3 sounds 3 skies thunder to the front. After doing all of this, he didn't even look at the results. He immediately retreated. He did not intend to fight Zhang Yan head-on in the first place. It would be best if Zhang Yan was injured after this round of attacks. If nothing happened, as long as he entered the mountains, he would be able to make a comeback next time. When Zhang Yan heard the thunder tide rolling in, whistling and rumbling, his expression turned solemn. Circulating his Xian Qi, his body abruptly grew taller, becoming about 300 feet tall. He suddenly rushed forward, without dodging or evading, his giant hands swept horizontally, slapping away the incoming thundercloud arrowhead. No matter how many lightning strikes you have, I will defeat them with my own strength. Rong Juanzhong did not expect Zhang Yan to have such a change. He was shocked and sped up his escape technique. Seeing that Rong Juanzhong wanted to escape, Zhang Yan's eyes lit up. He gathered his qi in his chest and roared. Rong Juanzhong felt dizzy and staggered. Just as Zhang Yan was about to move forward, the wind and clouds on his left suddenly stirred and a beam of spiritual light flew over. Turning his head, he saw a giant deer that was similar in size to him. The deer's muscles were bulging and its hooves were stepping on the clouds as it charged towards him like a bolt of lightning. In an instant, it was right in front of him. He snorted and reached out with one hand to grab the antler of the deer. He twisted it and pulled it to the ground. He then reached out and grabbed a ball of black gas. He used his Xian Qi to transform it into a giant axe. He raised his hand and chopped the giant deer to death. After that, he took a step forward and raised the axe with both hands before fiercely chopping down on the mountain ridge. Kacha! The mountain instantly shook and rocks flew everywhere. This mountain peak was forcefully split apart by him. He took another step forward and made a grabbing motion with his left hand, which condensed into a giant hammer. With a whistling sound, he swung it towards the streak of light that was suspended in the sky. Bang! It was as if glass had shattered in the sky. Dazzling light exploded and covered the sky. Golden light and silver stars sprinkled down. A distorted figure could be seen falling diagonally towards the foot of the mountain. Chapter 702. When Zhang Yan and Rong Juanzhong were fighting, it was shrouded in fog so no one could see what was happening inside. They could only tell that the battle was intense from the sounds of explosions and the light from the magical treasures. Yang Shuyong paced back and forth on the altar anxiously while repeating, "What's going on? What's going on?" Chunyu Ji said, "Jinren Rong has a plan." This time, he went into battle after careful consideration. That priest Zhang's cultivation is still a level lower. Even if his supernatural powers are sharp, he might not be Jinren Rong's match. Sect Master, please don't worry. Yang Shuyong heard this and felt slightly relieved. He said, Protector Chunyu is right. Our Xianyu cult has been working hard for 100 years, how could we? He hadn't finished speaking when he suddenly heard a loud noise as if the earth was splitting and the mountains were collapsing. The altar shook and his feet trembled. His heart couldn't help but tighten. He turned his head to look, but because of the thick fog, he still couldn't see anything. After a while, he saw a white sword light flying out from the fog, heading towards the direction of the bell platform. Yang Shuyong's expression changed and he cried out, did he win? Could it be that Jinren Rong? As the sect master, he lost his composure first. The disciples also felt like the sky was falling and panicked. Chunyuji felt something was wrong and shouted, what are you doing? The situation isn't clear, don't panic. He then turned around and cupped his hands at Yang Shuyong, sect master, Jinren Rong's real body is behind the mountain. I will go and take a look. Yang Shuyong said, go and come back quickly. Xing Fuliu saw the sword gleam fly away and was filled with regret. He cursed, if I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have come here. During the battle just now, he was cautious and hid in the back, avoiding the calamity. He was one of the few cultivators from outside the sect who managed to survive. Now that he thought about it, he felt that he couldn't stay here any longer. He looked around and went to a female cultivator. He whispered, Chain Yangzi. Why don't we leave earlier? Chain Yangzi was stunned and said, Jinren Rong, we signed the spell contract and the assembly isn't over. How can we leave? Xing Fuliu stomped his foot and said, fellow Daoist is muddle-headed. Could it be that he did not see that sword light? Daoist Master Zhang must have won. If Xian Yu loses this time, he will be eaten by that Zhong Tai sooner or later. How can he still care about us? Furthermore, we previously switched to Xian Yu. Zhong Tai might bear a grudge against me. If I don't leave now, I'm afraid I won't be able to leave in the future. Lady Che was a person without any ideas, so when she heard what he said, she became afraid. She nodded and said, Daoist Xing is right. We should leave as soon as possible. The two of them discussed in private for a while. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention to them at the moment, they quietly descended the mountain. Then, they rode on the conveyance light and flew out of the mountain. After they left Sleeping Star Mountain, the two of them heaved a sigh of relief. They were just about to go their separate ways when they felt their bodies sink, and they were pressed down to the point of being unable to move. Then, a figure flashed in front of them. It was a middle-aged cultivator with an elegant appearance and a mustache. He looked at the two of them and said in a deep voice, I'm here to ask you too, what's the situation in the mountain right now? Chunyuji's conveyance light went to the back of the mountain and came to the front of a cave. He waved away the child at the door and walked in. In less than 10 steps, he saw a person sitting on a praying mat. The person's face was pale, and his eyes were closed tightly. His heart skipped a beat, and he asked, Daoist Master Rong? Rong Juanzhong tried his best to lift his eyelids and said in a weak voice, Protector Chunyu, that Daoist Zhang's methods are not something we can fight against. I have lost this battle. Chunyu Ji stood for a while before saying, Daoist Master, victory and defeat are common. Take care and rest. Our sect still needs Daoist Master. Rong Juanzhong shook his head and said, my Yuanying Dharma body was destroyed by this person, and my Dao foundation has been destroyed. I have no hope of achieving Dao in this world. Later, I will use the talisman to find a place to reincarnate. Chunyu Ji was shocked and said anxiously, if Daoist Master leaves, I, Xian Yu, will lose an arm that can hold up the heavens. Daoist Master, please reconsider. Rong Juanzhong sighed and said, my vitality is exhausted. Even if I don't leave, I won't live for more than a few days. However, before I leave, I have a few words to tell you. Maybe it can save me, Xian Yu, from losing. Chunyu Ji's heart was heavy. He bent down and pretended to listen attentively. He said, Daoist Master, please speak. Rong Juanzhong's lips moved, and he whispered a few words to him. Chunyu Ji listened and nodded his head. Finally, he waved his hand and said, Protector Chunyu, go. If you can return to the sect and see Daoist Master He, tell him that I tried my best. However, this is the will of the heavens, and there is nothing I can do. After Chunyu Ji left, he came out of the cave. He had only taken a few steps when he suddenly heard thunder behind him. A white smoke flew out from the cave and disappeared in a flash. When he looked back, Rong Juanzhong, who was sitting in the depths of the cave, was no longer breathing. His body and Dao had disappeared. He didn't have time to be sad and hurried back to the mountain top. He ordered the surrounding disciples to leave and ran to Yang Shuyong's side. He bowed and said, "Sect leader, just now, Daoist Master Rong has suffered a great defeat in the battle. Daoist Master feels that he doesn't have much time left, so he activated the talisman that Daoist Master he gave him and went to reincarnate." Yang Shuyong originally had some hope, but after hearing this, it was as if he was struck by lightning. He was stunned on the spot and his mind was blank. The previous sect leader was his uncle, and it was not his turn to sit in the position of sect leader. It was all because of Rong Juanzhong's support that he was able to sit firmly. He had only inherited this position for a few decades, and everything had been smooth sailing. Now that there was such a big change, he was in a mess. Chunyu-ji followed Rong Juanzhong's instructions and said, "Sect leader, according to the rules of the battle, if we lose, we have to give up all of our celestial cities and manors. If at that time, the two sects really merge into one, my Xian Yu will no longer exist." He said it twice before Yang Shuyong came back to his senses. He was at a loss and said, Then what should we do?" Chunyu-ji said, "Just now, I have consulted Daoist Master Rong. He said that there are 3 things that must be done. First, I hope that sect leader can expel all of us from the sect. From then on, we will no longer be Xian Yu's disciples. Zhong Tai will not be able to take all of the celestial cities. This way, our sect will be able to preserve its vitality. When the next sect leader raises his arm, we might be able to make a comeback." Even though Yang Shuyong felt that these words were reasonable, he still felt that something was wrong. He frowned and said, "How can Zhong Tai let this go?" Chunyu-ji said, "Sect leader, even though we have lost this battle, our sect's strength has not been damaged. With the 3 sects of the south eyeing us, what can Zhong Tai do even if he is not satisfied?" Yang Shuyong said, "I am worried about that Daoist Zhang." Chunyu-ji bowed and said, "That Daoist Zhang is not under Zhong Tai. Daoist Master Rong, from his words and actions, he does not have the intention to fight to the death. If it really doesn't work, our celestial city can give him annual tributes from Shinwu Mountain. He will not refuse." Yang Shuyong hesitated and could not make up his mind. Chunyu-ji stomped his feet and urged him, "Sect leader, this matter cannot be delayed. If we are one step late and Zhong Tai comes, it will be too late." Yang Shuyong still did not want to make a decision. He only asked, "Then what is the second matter?" Chunyu-ji said, "My Xian Yu has been established for thousands of years. There are many cultivation items in the sect. We cannot let Zhong Tai have it so easily. Sect leader can send an order to Daoist Master He. Zhong Tai will not dare to go and ask for it. We can make other arrangements after the matter is over." Yang Shuyong nodded and said, "Let's talk about the third matter." Chunyu-ji said, "The 3 mountains chi suppressing tablet is the treasure of my sect. It was bestowed by the patriarch. Even if we lose to Xian Yu, as long as this item does not fall into Zhong Tai's hands, it will not be justifiable for him to occupy my land in the future. Sect leader, please think of a way to take it back." The 3 mountains chi suppressing tablet only had one secret incantation. Only the past sect leaders could take it. Without Yang Shuyong's permission, no one could move it. Chunyu-ji saw Yang Shuyong standing there with his brows knotted and not reacting for a while. He became anxious and loudly urged, "Sect leader, please make a decision quickly." Yang Shuyong's body shook and he seemed to come back to his senses. He sighed and said, "That's fine. As the sect leader, I cannot escape from this matter. Why should I implicate you all? I just hope that you will not forget what I said today." Finishing, he added, "My son is still young." Chunyu-ji knew what he meant. He bowed and said, "Little Mistress Yang is intelligent and talented. I will take good care of her." Yang Shuyong seemed to have seen through everything. His gaze became more steady. He said, "Emissary Chunyu, please summon the protectors and the master of the city." On the other side, the people on the clock platform were also waiting anxiously. When they saw a ray of sword light piercing through the clouds and rushing towards them, Elder Bai's spirits rose. He slapped the railing and said, "It's here." The sword light came above and spun in the air before settling down. Zhang Yan appeared from the light. He then shook his sleeve and the sword pellet turned into a strand of light that entered the heart of his brows. Sect leader Qiao walked out from the crowd and asked with slight anticipation, "Jinren Zhang? I wonder." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Rong Juanzhong has been defeated." As soon as these words were spoken, waves of exclamations sounded out from both sides. Even though they knew that the outcome would be like this, it still caused them to be extremely excited. Not long after, the younger generation disciples behind them heard of this matter as well, and waves of cheers instantly sounded out. Sect leader Qiao's emotions were like a tide. He said, "This battle is all thanks to Jinren's efforts. Please accept a bow from me, Qiao Huanzhuan." When he finished, he bowed heavily. Zhang Yan raised his hand to return the bow and said, "I signed the contract on the clock platform, so it's natural for me to put in effort." Sect leader Qiao is exaggerating. Sect leader Qiao straightened his body and cupped his hands again. "I'll still need Jinren's help for the follow-up matters." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Sect leader Qiao is wrong. Even if there's no I, your sect will still be able to suppress Xian Yu." Since Rong Juanzhong was defeated, there was no more suspense about what would happen next. There was still Du Shixuan on the clock platform. This person's strength path Xian Gong only needed to consume some spirit medicine and recuperate for a day and a half, and he would recover. How would Xian Yu be able to find someone to contend against him now? Sect leader Qiao was stunned, but he immediately understood the reason. He bowed and said with a smile, "Jinren, please take a seat." Zhang Yan gladly went to the seat and sat down. Everyone followed suit. At this moment, in the valley in front of them, the mist had gradually dissipated. Everyone looked over and saw that where the two of them had fought just now, the mountain had collapsed, the rocks had shattered, and the ground was covered with broken branches and leaves. It was truly a shocking sight. Sect leader Qiao was also afraid. He pondered for a while, then suddenly raised his head and said, "When Jinren defeated old man Jin Ling, you said that there was something that was not convenient to mention. I wonder if you can tell me now. P.S.